Silence can tell a story just as powerfully as words. The ancient world proves that better than anywhere else on Earth. Across continents, enormous monuments still rise above the landscape, yet they offer no explanation for their existence. They do not tell us who made the first decision to build them. They do not reveal how countless workers organized impossible projects without modern technology. They do not explain why some thriving places were suddenly abandoned while others endured for centuries. Instead, they remain silent, leaving only stone, geometry, and scattered fragments for future generations to interpret. That silence has become one of archaeology's greatest challenges, because every unanswered question is an invitation to keep searching, and every ancient structure reminds us that the past has never stopped guarding its greatest secrets. Few places in the world illustrate the sudden collapse of a powerful city quite like Port Royal, Jamaica. Once described by contemporaries as the richest and wickedest city in the New World, this Caribbean port flourished during the late 17th century as a hub of trade, privateering, and naval power. Yet today, much of the city lies silently beneath the waters of Kingston Harbour, preserved in mud like a time capsule. What makes Port Royal particularly fascinating to historians and archaeologists is not only the dramatic catastrophe that sank it in 1692, but also the remarkably advanced harbour engineering and urban construction techniques that allowed such a sophisticated port city to exist on a fragile strip of sand, even centuries later, where some aspects of the city's infrastructure and engineering choices remain difficult for scientists to fully explain. Port Royal was established by the English in 1655 after they captured Jamaica from Spain. Its location at the end of the Palisadoes, a narrow sand spit guarding the entrance to Kingston Harbour, made it a strategically perfect maritime base. By the 1670s and 1680s, the city had grown into one of the busiest ports in the Americas. Historical records suggest that the population reached 6,500 to 7,000 residents, an enormous number for a colonial settlement of the time. The city contained warehouses, taverns, merchant houses, shipyards, and fortifications, and serving as both a legitimate trading centre and a base for privateers such as the famous Sir Henry Morgan. However, the true marvel of Port Royal lay beneath its bustling streets, the infrastructure of its harbour. Unlike many colonial settlements that developed gradually with simple wooden docks, Port Royal appears to have been built with a surprisingly organised maritime design. Archaeological surveys have revealed evidence of large wharves, reinforced piers, and extensive waterfront storage complexes, indicating that the city functioned as a carefully planned commercial port rather than merely a pirate haven. Wooden pilings driven deep into the seabed supported massive docking structures capable of handling heavily loaded merchant ships arriving from Europe and the Spanish Main. Some docks were reportedly built using oak and lignum vitae, woods known for their extraordinary resistance to rot and marine organisms. Excavations conducted by underwater archaeologists in the 1960s and 1970s, particularly by Edwin and Marion Link, documented sections of these wharf structures still embedded in the seabed more than 3 centuries later. What astonishes researchers is the fact that these heavy port facilities were constructed on a foundation composed largely of loose sand and sediment. Modern engineers know that such terrain is extremely unstable, particularly in seismically active regions. Normally, large stone or brick buildings require stable bedrock or deep foundations. Yet Port Royal featured multi-storey brick warehouses, some weighing hundreds of tons, standing directly adjacent to the shoreline. Archaeological mapping of the submerged city has revealed rows of buildings aligned with the waterfront, forming an organised grid system of streets and docks. This layout resembles the commercial port structure seen in European cities such as London or Amsterdam, suggesting that British engineers attempted to replicate advanced harbour designs from the Old World in a colonial environment that was geologically far less stable. The mystery deepens when considering the catastrophic event that ended Port Royal's golden age. On June 7th, 1692, a powerful earthquake estimated at magnitude 7.5 struck the region. According to contemporary accounts, the ground began to ripple like waves, buildings cracked apart, and within minutes large sections of the city simply collapsed into the sea. Approximately 2/3 of Port Royal sank beneath the water and nearly 2,000 people were killed. The phenomenon responsible for this destruction is now believed to be soil liquefaction, in which water-saturated sand temporarily loses its strength during intense shaking. However, the exact mechanics of the disaster remain a subject of ongoing research. What makes the event particularly intriguing is that many parts of the city did not disintegrate completely. Instead, entire streets and buildings appear to have slid downward almost intact, settling under 10 to 15 meters of water. Underwater surveys have discovered houses still standing upright, their walls leaning at strange angles but largely preserved. In some locations, archaeologists found objects exactly where they'd been left moments before the earthquake. Bottles on tavern tables, clay pipes scattered across floors, and merchant goods still stacked in storerooms. Because the buildings collapsed rapidly into soft mud, oxygen was largely excluded from the site, creating an environment that preserved organic materials unusually well. For this reason, scholars often refer to Port Royal as the underwater Pompeii of the Caribbean. Beginning in the 1950s and expanding through the 1970s and 1980s, underwater excavations uncovered thousands of artifacts that shed light on life in the city before the disaster. Researchers recovered ceramic dishes from England, glassware from Venice, coins from Spain, navigational instruments, weapons, and even fragments of clothing. More than 750,000 individual artifacts have reportedly been catalogued from the site. Detailed mapping using sonar and underwater photography has revealed an extensive portion of the old waterfront district, including sections of streets, building foundations, and dock infrastructure. These discoveries confirm that Port Royal was not simply a chaotic pirate town, but a sophisticated maritime centre with carefully engineered logistics systems. The harbour structures themselves remain one of the most puzzling elements of the site. Evidence suggests that engineers used dense wooden pilings, driven several metres into the seabed, forming a lattice capable of supporting docks and heavy cargo platforms. This technique resembles harbour construction methods used in 17th century Dutch ports, where timber piles stabilised waterfront structures built over soft sediments. Yet implementing such techniques on a remote Caribbean sandbar would have required extensive planning, specialised labour, and a deep understanding of maritime engineering. Considering the technological limitations of the time, it is remarkable that the infrastructure functioned effectively for nearly 4 decades before the earthquake struck. Comparisons with other ancient harbour sites highlight how unusual Port Royal's engineering truly was. For example, the famous Roman harbour at Caesarea Maritima in Israel used hydraulic concrete to stabilise its breakwaters, while Mediterranean ports such as Alexandria relied on massive stone blocks placed on relatively stable seabeds. Port Royal, by contrast, attempted to support an entire urban waterfront on a shifting sand formation exposed to earthquakes and tropical storms. From a modern perspective, the decision seems dangerously risky, yet the port operated successfully as one of the most active trade centres in the Caribbean for decades. Today, large portions of Port Royal remain unexplored beneath layers of sediment. Modern research using side-scan sonar, magnetometers, and digital 3-dimensional mapping has revealed that only a fraction of the submerged city has been systematically excavated. Archaeologists believe that entire districts of the original port, including additional warehouses, ships, and dock complexes, may still lie buried beneath the harbour floor. Each new survey reinforces the idea that Port Royal represents one of the most important underwater archaeological sites in the Western Hemisphere. Ultimately, the story of Port Royal is not just about pirates and disaster. It is a story of ambitious engineering carried out in a challenging environment, where colonial builders attempted to recreate advanced European harbour systems on unstable tropical terrain. The city's sudden destruction froze that experiment in time, leaving behind a submerged landscape that continues to puzzle scientists. More than 3 centuries after the earthquake, yet the silent ruins beneath Kingston Harbour still raise a fascinating question. How did a thriving port city with such advanced maritime infrastructure flourish for decades on ground that nature would ultimately reclaim in a matter of minutes? The Piri Reis map, created in 1513 by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri Reis, remains one of the most mysterious artifacts in the history of cartography. Only a surviving fragment of the original map exists today, yet even this small portion has sparked decades of debate among historians, geographers, and archaeologists. The map was rediscovered in 1929 in the archives of Topkapi Palace, where scholars cataloguing Ottoman manuscripts stumbled upon a parchment drawn on gazelle skin. At first glance, it appeared to be just another early 16th century Portolan chart, but closer examination revealed something extraordinary. The fragment depicts parts of Europe, West Africa, and the eastern coastline of South America with a level of geographical detail that seems surprisingly advanced for its time. What makes the map especially intriguing is that it was drawn only about 21 years after Christopher Columbus first reached the Caribbean in 1492, at a time when European knowledge of the Americas was still extremely limited. Despite this, the southern portion of the map shows long stretches of the Brazilian coastline in shapes that resemble modern maps far more closely than scholars would expect from such an early period of exploration. The most remarkable and widely discussed feature of the Piri Reis map is the astonishing accuracy of certain coastlines, particularly those of South America. When modern researchers overlay the surviving fragment with satellite maps, several sections align surprisingly well with the actual curvature of the continent's eastern coast. For example, the map depicts the bulging coastline of northeastern Brazil and the long downward sweep toward what is now Rio de Janeiro, with proportions that approximate modern geographic data. Considering the limitations of navigation technology in the early 16th century, such accuracy is difficult to explain. Sailors at that time could measure latitude using the altitude of the sun or stars, but determining longitude accurately remained a major unsolved problem until the 18th century with the invention of the marine chronometer. Without reliable longitude measurements, early maps usually distorted the shapes of continents and distances between them. Yet the Piri Reis map places the western coast of Africa and the eastern coast of South America at distances that roughly correspond to the actual width of the Atlantic Ocean, suggesting that the cartographer may have relied on earlier geographical sources that were unexpectedly precise. The explanation offered by Piri Reis himself deepens the mystery. In the handwritten notes that appear along the margins of the map, he explains that the chart was compiled from approximately 20 different earlier maps and nautical charts. According to his own account, these sources included ancient Greek maps, Arabic geographical works, and charts produced by sailors who had travelled with Columbus. Some historians interpret these notes as evidence that the Piri Reis map was essentially a compilation of many earlier traditions of cartography. However, many of the maps he claimed to have used have never been found, leaving scholars unable to evaluate their accuracy or origins. If these lost maps truly existed, they might represent fragments of a much older body of geographical knowledge that has largely disappeared from the historical record. Modern scientific analysis has attempted to better understand the map's technical qualities. Several geographic studies conducted in the 20th century examined the projection and geometry of the surviving fragment. Researchers noted that the map seems to follow a systematic spatial logic rather than random sketching. Some scholars suggested that it may have been constructed using a form of spherical projection, a mathematical method for translating the curved surface of Earth onto a flat plane. If this interpretation is correct, it would imply that at least some of the source maps used by Piri Reis were based on surprisingly advanced geographic calculations. In later cartographic innovations, such as the projection developed by Gerardus Mercator in 1569, introduced precise mathematical techniques for representing global navigation routes, but the Piri Reis map predates these widely adopted methods by several decades. The map also contains numerous inscriptions describing how information was gathered. Some notes explain where certain coastlines were reported by sailors, while others describe regions that had only recently been explored. These annotations suggest that Piri Reis attempted to combine first-hand reports from explorers with older geographical traditions. Archaeological and archival research into Ottoman navigation has shown that the empire possessed an extensive maritime network across the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean, giving its sailors access to geographical information from multiple cultures. In this context, the Piri Reis map might represent a unique synthesis of knowledge collected from Portuguese, Arab and Mediterranean navigators during the early age of global exploration. Nevertheless, several questions remain unresolved. Only about 1/3 of the original map survives today, leaving historians uncertain about the full scope of its geographical coverage. The missing sections may once have shown the rest of the Americas or additional parts of the Atlantic world. Because those sections are lost, researchers cannot determine whether the entire map maintained the same level of accuracy seen in the surviving fragment. Moreover, debates continue about whether the alignment of certain coastlines truly reflects advanced geographical knowledge, or whether some similarities to modern maps are coincidental. Some scholars argue that the shapes of the coastlines are still distorted when examined carefully, while others maintain that the general proportions remain impressive considering the historical context. Even today, the Piri Reis map remains one of the most fascinating puzzles in the history of navigation. Its surprisingly accurate depiction of the South American coastline, the mysterious lost maps that Piri Reis claimed to use, and the map's unusual geometric structure all suggest that early cartographers may have possessed far more geographical knowledge than historians once believed. More than 5 centuries after it was drawn, and this surviving fragment continues to raise an intriguing question. Could traces of advanced ancient mapping knowledge still be hidden in forgotten archives or lost maps waiting to be rediscovered? In your opinion, where did the astonishing accuracy of the Piri Reis map come from? Was it simply the result of skillfully combining many older maps? Or could it reflect an ancient source of geographical knowledge that has been lost to history? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. The Tanit Temple of Kirkwane in Tunisia stands among the most intriguing surviving religious structures of the ancient Punic world. Located inside the remarkably well-preserved Punic city of Kirkwane on the Cap Bon Peninsula, this sanctuary was dedicated to the powerful Carthaginian goddess Tanit, a deity associated with fertility, protection, and celestial power in the civilization of Carthage. What makes the temple particularly fascinating is not merely its religious symbolism but the surprising engineering sophistication embedded within its construction. Despite being built more than 2,000 years ago, most likely between the 4th and 3rd centuries BCE, the structural remains reveal an advanced Punic building technology whose durability continues to puzzle archaeologists today. Among all the mysteries surrounding the site, the most remarkable involves the unusually resilient stone and brick construction techniques used by Punic builders, techniques that allowed the sanctuary's foundations and walls to survive in a harsh coastal environment where many ancient structures would normally have deteriorated long ago. The ruins of Kirk Owain were first systematically identified in the early 20th century, with major excavations conducted during the 1950s and 1960s by French and Tunisian archaeological teams. Unlike many ancient cities of North Africa that were later rebuilt by Roman settlers, Kirk Owain was abandoned after its destruction during the First Punic War and was never significantly reoccupied. Because of this unusual historical circumstance, the archaeological layers remained relatively undisturbed, allowing researchers to study a Punic city in a state close to its original condition. Within this preserved urban layout, the Tanit Temple appears as a sacred complex integrated into a carefully planned neighbourhood of houses, workshops, and ritual spaces. Excavations uncovered stone altars, courtyards, and foundations constructed with a combination of limestone blocks, fired bricks, and a distinctive lime-based mortar, whose composition has become one of the most intriguing technological puzzles of the site. One of the first observations made by archaeologists studying the temple was the exceptional stability of its construction materials. Kirk Owain lies only a short distance from the Mediterranean shoreline, an environment characterized by salt-laden winds, seasonal humidity, flood, and strong coastal erosion, conditions that typically accelerate the decay of ancient masonry. Yet the walls and foundations of the Tanit Sanctuary remain surprisingly intact, even after more than 2 millennia. In several sections of the temple complex, the stone blocks retain their original alignment with minimal displacement, suggesting that the builders employed a construction method capable of resisting both environmental degradation and ground movement. Laboratory analyses of mortar samples conducted during archaeological studies in the late 20th century revealed a mixture dominated by lime and finely crushed aggregates, possibly including marine sand and mineral additives. Although the exact proportions are still debated, some researchers believe that the Punic masons may have developed a specialized mortar designed to withstand moisture and salt infiltration. This discovery has led to comparisons with another famous ancient building technology, the hydraulic concrete used by the Romans centuries later. Roman maritime structures, such as the harbour installations at Portus, are known to have relied on volcanic ash and lime to create a durable concrete capable of hardening underwater. While the Punic builders at Kirk Owain did not produce concrete in exactly the same form, the resilience of their masonry suggests a similar understanding of mineral chemistry. Some archaeologists have proposed that the lime mortar used in the Tanit Temple may have included naturally reactive materials that increased its strength over time. If this hypothesis is correct, the Punic engineers may have possessed empirical knowledge of long-lasting construction compounds long before Roman engineers refined comparable techniques. Equally intriguing is the precise arrangement of stone blocks within the temple's structural framework. Many of the surviving walls display carefully cut limestone blocks laid in tight horizontal courses with minimal gaps between them. Measurements conducted during architectural surveys indicate that the alignment of certain foundation lines deviates by only a few centimeters across several meters of wall length, a level of precision that implies deliberate planning and skilled craftsmanship. For comparison, similar levels of stone block accuracy are often associated with monumental Mediterranean structures, such as the Greek temples at Temple of Hera at Paestum. Yet the Punic sanctuary at Kirk Owain was built in a relatively modest urban environment, rather than as an enormous monumental complex. This raises an important question. How did Punic builders achieve such geometric consistency, using the relatively simple tools available during the classical period? Another remarkable feature of the Tanit Temple is the integration of stone construction with fired brick elements. Archaeologists discovered that certain interior structures and partitions were built from rectangular bricks, bonded with lime mortar, forming stable surfaces that complemented the heavier limestone foundations. This hybrid technique appears to have provided both structural strength and architectural flexibility. In several sections of the sanctuary, bricklayers were used to create level platforms or raised ritual spaces around altars. Because fired bricks are lighter than large stone blocks, their use would have reduced stress on the foundation, while still allowing builders to construct elevated ceremonial features. Interestingly, the dimensions of the bricks discovered at Kirk Owain appear relatively standardized, suggesting the existence of organized production methods within the Punic city. Excavations conducted in the 1970s and later decades also revealed drainage channels and small basins near the temple courtyard, indicating that the builders incorporated water management into the design of the sanctuary. These channels were carved into stone or lined with masonry, and appear to have been carefully angled to guide water away from the ritual areas. Although the slopes are subtle, often only a few degrees, they are sufficient to ensure steady drainage during rainfall. This demonstrates that Punic architects understood the importance of protecting sacred structures from water accumulation, which could weaken foundations over time. Such attention to environmental durability further emphasizes the technical sophistication behind the temple's construction. In addition to structural engineering, the temple complex contains symbolic carvings associated with the goddess Tanit. The well-known Tanit symbol, often depicted as a triangular figure topped by a circle and crossed by a horizontal bar, appears on stones and ritual surfaces throughout the site. These engravings are cut with notable consistency and depth, suggesting that artisans used hardened metal chisels capable of carving precise lines into limestone. While iron tools were available during the Punic period, relatively few examples have been recovered from the site, leaving open questions about the exact techniques used to produce these carvings. Perhaps the greatest archaeological mystery surrounding the Tanit Temple arises from the abrupt historical fate of Kirk Owain itself. During the First Punic War between Rome and Carthage, the city was likely destroyed or abandoned around the middle of the 3rd century BCE. Unlike Carthage, which was later rebuilt and transformed into a major Roman centre, Kirk Owain was never extensively resettled. As a result, its buildings, including the Tanit Sanctuary, remained frozen in time beneath layers of sand and soil. When archaeologists uncovered the site centuries later, they encountered an unusually intact Punic urban landscape, providing a rare glimpse into a civilization that left few written architectural records. What secret building technology might the Punic engineers have known that we still don't fully understand today? Tell us your theory in the comments below. Thousands of years before the North Sea existed in its modern form, a vast stretch of land once connected the British Isles to mainland Europe. This lost landscape is known today as Doggerland, a prehistoric region that lay between what are now the coasts of the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, Denmark, and Germany. During the end of the last ice age, roughly 12,000 to 8,000 years ago, Doggerland was not an empty wilderness, but a thriving environment filled with rivers, marshlands, forests, and fertile plains. Archaeologists estimate that this region may have covered over 100,000 square kilometres, making it comparable in size to modern countries like Iceland. Yet what makes Doggerland so fascinating is not merely that it disappeared beneath the sea, but that beneath the waters of the North Sea lie clues suggesting a surprisingly sophisticated human culture from the Mesolithic period, one whose technological abilities may have been far more advanced than previously believed. For centuries, the existence of Doggerland was unknown. Fishermen occasionally pulled strange artifacts from the seabed, animal bones, worked flints, and even fragments of human remains. but it was not until the late 20th century that the full picture began to emerge. Ironically, the breakthrough came not from archaeologists but from oil and gas companies surveying the North Sea. Using seismic mapping technology, originally designed to locate underground oil deposits, researchers discovered the outlines of ancient river valleys, coastlines, and lake beds buried beneath layers of marine sediment. By the early 2000s, projects such as the North Sea Paleolandscapes Project, led by the University of Birmingham, used high-resolution seismic data to reconstruct an astonishingly detailed map of the lost landscape. These reconstructions revealed an intricate terrain of winding rivers, wetlands, and forested ridges, an ecosystem that would have been ideal for human habitation. Yet the true mystery of Doggerland lies in the artifacts recovered from its submerged soil. Among the most intriguing discoveries are Mesolithic stone tools, many of which have been dredged up accidentally by fishing trawlers or discovered during seabed surveys. These include finely shaped flint blades, spearheads, scrapers, and axes, some dating back more than 9,000 years. At first glance, such tools might seem typical for Stone Age societies. However, closer examination reveals something remarkable. Many of them display a level of craftsmanship that suggests an extremely refined understanding of stoneworking techniques. Flint knapping, the process of shaping stone by striking it precisely to remove flakes, requires careful control over fracture patterns. The tools found in Doggerland often exhibit long, symmetrical blades and carefully retouched edges, features that demand considerable skill and planning. In some cases, the flint blades recovered from the North Sea measure over 15 centimeters in length and have edges so sharp that experimental archaeologists have compared their cutting ability to that of modern surgical scalpels. Creating such blades requires striking the stone at precisely the correct angle to control the conchoidal fracture characteristic of flint. A single mistake can shatter the entire piece. This suggests that Mesolithic craftspeople in Doggerland were not merely improvising tools, but had developed specialized techniques passed down through generations. Some archaeologists believe that certain blades were produced using advanced pressure flaking methods, a technique in which steady pressure rather than direct strikes is used to shape the edge. This method allows for extraordinary precision and is often associated with later prehistoric cultures, yet examples of similar workmanship appear in Doggerland artifacts thousands of years earlier. The sophistication of these tools becomes even more striking when compared with other Mesolithic sites across Europe. For example, flint industries from inland regions such as Starcar in England, one of the most famous Mesolithic settlements, demonstrate advanced tool-making but typically produce shorter blades and less symmetrical forms. By contrast, some Doggerland artifacts show a degree of uniformity, suggesting organized production. This raises the possibility that the inhabitants of Doggerland may have established specialized areas for flint extraction and tool manufacture. Geological surveys have identified regions beneath the North Sea where natural deposits of high-quality flint once existed, and there is evidence that prehistoric populations may have systematically exploited these sources. If true, this would imply a level of economic organization rarely associated with hunter-gatherer societies of this period. Another intriguing aspect of these tools is their aerodynamic design. Certain spearheads and projectile points recovered from the region display elongated shapes and carefully balanced edges that would have improved penetration when used in hunting. Experimental reconstructions show that similar designs can significantly increase the effectiveness of thrown spears, allowing hunters to target large animals such as aurochs, red deer, or even the last surviving populations of mammoths that roamed northern Europe after the Ice Age. The precision of these designs suggests that Doggerland's inhabitants possessed a deep practical understanding of material properties and projectile dynamics. While they certainly did not possess formal scientific theories, generations of experimentation may have allowed them to refine their weapons to a remarkable degree. The presence of these sophisticated tools also hints at a broader cultural network. Flint artifacts found in areas of Britain and Scandinavia sometimes match the geological signature of flint sources believed to have existed in Doggerland. This suggests that the region may have functioned as a central hub of prehistoric movement and exchange, linking communities across what is now the North Sea basin. Before rising waters isolated Britain as an island, Doggerland likely served as a corridor through which people, animals, and technologies moved freely. In this sense, the submerged land may have played a crucial role in shaping the cultural landscape of prehistoric Northern Europe. Archaeological discoveries from the seabed continue to add new pieces to this puzzle. In 1931, a fishing trawler dredging near the Dogger Bank pulled up a fragment of a human skull later dated to around 9,000 years old, offering the first direct evidence that humans once lived in the region. Since then, dozens of artifacts have been recovered, including bone harpoons, antler tools, and worked flints. More recently, advanced techniques such as sediment DNA analysis and underwater core sampling have allowed researchers to detect traces of ancient plants, animals, and even human activity buried deep beneath the seabed. These studies reveal a vibrant ecosystem in which prehistoric communities hunted, gathered, and crafted tools along rivers and wetlands that no longer exist. Despite these discoveries, the full story of Doggerland remains hidden beneath layers of sand and sediment. Around 8,200 years ago, the region experienced a catastrophic event known as the Storegga Slide, a massive underwater landslide off the coast of Norway that triggered a tsunami across the North Sea. Geological evidence indicates that waves, possibly reaching 20 to 30 meters in height, swept across the low-lying plains of Doggerland. Combined with the gradual rise of sea levels after the Ice Age, this disaster may have marked the final chapter in the region's history, transforming fertile landscapes into the seabed we see today. What remains most fascinating, however, is the glimpse Doggerland offers into the ingenuity of prehistoric humans. The finely crafted flint tools recovered from the North Sea challenge the outdated image of Mesolithic societies as technologically simple. Instead, they reveal communities capable of mastering complex stoneworking techniques, organizing resource extraction, and developing highly effective hunting technologies thousands of years before the rise of agriculture or metal tools. Beneath the waves of the North Sea lies not only a lost landscape, but the buried evidence of human innovation, proof that even in the distant Stone Age, our ancestors possessed the creativity and technical skill to shape their world in ways we are only beginning to understand. The Uluburun Bronze Age shipwreck, discovered off the southern coast of Turkey near the town of Kaş, is widely considered one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries ever made beneath the sea. Dating to approximately 1300 BCE, during the Late Bronze Age, this ancient merchant vessel provides an unprecedented window into the technological sophistication and global trade networks of the ancient Mediterranean world. The shipwreck was first discovered in 1982 by a Turkish sponge diver named Mehmet Shakir, who noticed unusual metal objects scattered across the seabed at a depth of roughly 45 to 60 meters. Shortly after the discovery, a team of underwater archaeologists led by George F. Bass from the Institute of Nautical Archaeology began systematic excavations. Over the course of 11 excavation seasons between 1984 and 1994, divers conducted more than 22,000 individual dives, gradually recovering thousands of artifacts from the seabed. The sheer scale and diversity of the cargo stunned researchers, revealing a snapshot of an interconnected Bronze Age world far more technologically advanced and globally linked than previously imagined. Among the most striking aspects of the Uluburun shipwreck is the sophistication of the ship itself. The vessel was approximately 15 to 16 meters long and constructed primarily from Lebanese cedar wood, a prized material known throughout the ancient Near East for its strength and durability. The shipbuilders used a complex mortise and tenon joinery system, into which precisely cut wooden pegs and joints held the planks together without relying heavily on metal nails. Archaeologists estimate that thousands of these wooden joints were used to assemble the hull, creating a structure strong enough to carry more than 20 tons of cargo across open sea routes. Such craftsmanship suggests that Bronze Age shipbuilders possessed advanced woodworking skills and engineering knowledge comparable to techniques used in Mediterranean shipbuilding more than a millennium later. Yet this remarkable vessel was only the beginning of the mystery. The cargo recovered from the wreck represents one of the most diverse assemblages of ancient trade goods ever discovered. The ship carried at least 10 tons of copper ingots, most of them cast in the distinctive oxide shape that allowed them to be easily stacked and transported. Each ingot weighed around 20 to 25 kilograms, and in total archaeologists recovered 354 copper ingots, most likely produced in Cyprus, the primary copper-producing region of the Bronze Age Mediterranean. Alongside the copper were approximately 1 ton of tin ingots, a crucial ingredient used to create bronze when alloyed with copper. This mixture formed the technological backbone of Bronze Age civilizations, enabling the production of stronger tools, weapons, and architectural components. The presence of both metals on a single ship suggests that the vessel was transporting raw materials intended for large-scale metal production somewhere in the eastern Mediterranean. Yet the Aluberan shipwreck was far more than a metal transport vessel. The cargo included goods from across an enormous geographic area, indicating an extensive international trade network. Archaeologists recovered ivory from African elephants, hippopotamus teeth, Baltic amber from northern Europe, ebony wood from Nubia, Mycenaean pottery from Greece, and luxurious gold jewellery likely produced in the Levant. One of the most famous artifacts is a gold scarab bearing the name of Queen Nefertiti of Egypt, suggesting diplomatic or elite connections between powerful kingdoms of the time. Such diversity implies that by the 14th century BCE, long-distance maritime trade connected civilizations from the Aegean, Egypt, Anatolia, Mesopotamia, and possibly even Central Asia. In many ways, the Aluberan ship can be seen as a kind of Bronze Age cargo vessel, transporting raw materials, luxury goods, and diplomatic gifts across a vast and interconnected economic network. However, among all the remarkable discoveries aboard the ship, perhaps the most mysterious and technologically intriguing are the glass ingots found within the cargo. Archaeologists recovered approximately 175 glass ingots, making them the oldest large-scale shipment of raw glass ever discovered in the archaeological record. These ingots were formed into rounded or bun-shaped lumps of vividly coloured glass, including shades of deep cobalt blue, turquoise, violet, and amber. Chemical analysis revealed that the glass was produced using a mixture of silica, sand, plant ash, and mineral additives, heated to temperatures exceeding 1,100 degrees Celsius. Achieving such temperatures in Bronze Age furnaces would have required carefully constructed kilns capable of sustaining intense heat and precise control over airflow and fuel sources. The most fascinating aspect of these glass ingots is the presence of cobalt-coloured glass, which requires extremely specific chemical conditions to produce. The cobalt pigment likely came from mineral sources containing cobalt oxide, possibly originating from regions such as Egypt or Western Asia. To create a consistent blue coloration, ancient glassmakers had to precisely measure mineral additives and maintain stable furnace temperatures. Even slight variations in temperature or chemical composition could result in entirely different colors or structural defects in the glass. Modern experimental archaeology has demonstrated that producing such high-quality, Coloured glass requires remarkable technical knowledge of furnace design, raw material ratios, and cooling processes. The Uluburun glass ingots therefore suggest that Bronze Age artisans possessed an unexpectedly advanced understanding of pyrotechnology. To appreciate how extraordinary this discovery is, it is useful to compare it with other early glass finds. Small glass beads and decorative objects are known from Egyptian and Mesopotamian sites, dating back to around 1600 BCE, but these items were typically produced in small quantities and used primarily for jewellery. The Uluburun cargo, by contrast, represents industrial-scale raw material production, indicating that glass was already being manufactured in bulk and shipped as a trade commodity. In essence, these ingots functioned like ancient raw materials for glass workshops, much the way modern industries transport raw steel or aluminum for later processing. This suggests that specialized production centers existed somewhere in the Eastern Mediterranean, where large batches of glass were manufactured and exported to craftsmen across different regions. The question that continues to puzzle researchers is where exactly these glass ingots were produced, and how Bronze Age craftsmen managed to achieve such consistent quality. Some scholars argue that the glass originated in Egyptian royal workshops, which are known to have produced coloured glass during the reign of pharaohs such as Amenhotep III. Others believe the glass may have been manufactured in Mesopotamian or Levantine centres, where evidence of early glass furnaces has also been found. Chemical isotope analysis of the glass suggests that the raw silica used in production may have come from coastal sand deposits in the Eastern Mediterranean, but the exact production site remains uncertain. This uncertainty has fueled ongoing debates about whether glass-making technology developed independently in multiple regions or spread through trade networks between civilizations. Further archaeological study of the Uluburun shipwreck has revealed additional insights into Bronze Age craftsmanship and trade practices. The ship's cargo also included balance scales and standardized weights, indicating that merchants on board relied on precise measurement systems to conduct trade. These weights correspond closely with weight standards used in the Near East, suggesting the existence of shared economic conventions across distant cultures. Such standardization would have been essential for international trade, allowing merchants from different regions to exchange goods using mutually understood measurement systems. In many ways, this reflects an early form of economic globalization long before the rise of classical civilizations such as Greece and Rome. Despite decades of research, many aspects of the Uluburun shipwreck remain mysterious. The identity of the ship's owners is still debated among scholars. Some researchers believe the cargo represents a royal diplomatic shipment, perhaps sent as gifts between powerful Bronze Age kingdoms such as Egypt, the Hittite Empire, and Mycenaean Greece. Others argue that the vessel may have belonged to a wealthy merchant operating within a vast commercial network linking multiple civilizations. The cause of the ship's sinking is also uncertain. No clear evidence of battle or piracy has been found, leading many to suspect that the ship was lost during a violent storm or while attempting to navigate the rocky coastline of southern Anatolia. In your opinion, how advanced was Bronze Age glass-making technology? And could the Uluburun ship be evidence of an ancient technological network that we still do not fully understand? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Rising once above the bustling Mediterranean port of Alexandria, the legendary lighthouse of Alexandria, also known as the Pharos, was not only one of the most famous engineering achievements of the ancient world, but also one of its greatest technological mysteries. Built during the reign of Ptolemy II Philadelphus, around 280 to 247 BCE, the lighthouse stood on the small island of Pharos at the entrance of Alexandria's harbour. Ancient sources describe a monumental structure rising between 100 and 130 metres high, making it one of the tallest human-made constructions on Earth for more than a millennium, surpassed only by the Great Pyramid of Giza. For sailors navigating the dangerous Mediterranean coastline, the tower served as a beacon visible from astonishing distances and guiding ships safely toward one of the greatest cities of the ancient world. Yet despite centuries of historical references, archaeological discoveries, and scientific research, many aspects of the lighthouse, particularly its remarkable light reflection system, remain deeply puzzling. The lighthouse itself was a colossal architectural feat. Classical descriptions by ancient writers such as Strabo and later Arab historians describe a tower composed of 3 massive tiers: a large square base, an octagonal middle section, and a cylindrical tower at the top. These levels were constructed from enormous blocks of limestone and granite, some weighing 20 to 30 tons each. Transporting and precisely placing such stones in a structure more than 100 meters tall would have required an advanced system of cranes, ramps, and lifting technology. Unlike later medieval engineering projects, however, no surviving blueprints, construction manuals, or technical documents describe exactly how the builders achieved this feat. Archaeologists believe the design included internal ramps or spiral corridors that allowed workers and pack animals to transport fuel and materials to the top of the tower. Even with such systems, the sheer scale of the lighthouse raises questions about the logistical organization and technical capabilities of the Ptolemaic engineers who designed it. But the most fascinating mystery of the Pharos was not its size. It was its light projection system, which ancient writers claimed could be seen from extraordinary distances across the sea. Historical sources indicate that the lighthouse operated using a large fire burning at the summit. However, the fire alone could not account for the range of visibility described in ancient texts. According to multiple accounts, the light was intensified by a massive reflective mirror, possibly made of polished bronze or another metal alloy. Some historians claim the beam could be seen up to 50 kilometers away, an astonishing range even by modern lighthouse standards. To understand why this claim is so puzzling, it helps to compare the pharaohs to other ancient navigation systems. Most ancient coastal beacons were simple fires or torches placed on cliffs or towers, visible only for a few kilometers. Even in the Roman world, lighthouse technology rarely exceeded 20 to 25 meters in height and relied solely on flame illumination. In contrast, the Alexandrian lighthouse combined height, optics, and reflection, suggesting an understanding of light manipulation far more advanced than typically attributed to ancient engineers. The exact nature of this mirror remains one of the greatest unanswered questions in the study of ancient technology. If it truly functioned as described, the mirror would have needed an extremely smooth and highly polished surface, capable of reflecting a large amount of light without scattering it. Bronze mirrors were known in antiquity, but they were typically small, used for personal grooming, and rarely exceeded a few tens of centimeters in diameter. A mirror large enough to reflect a lighthouse flame across tens of kilometers would have required a diameter possibly exceeding several meters. Producing such a device would demand advanced metallurgical techniques, including the ability to cast large bronze plates and polish them to near-perfect smoothness. Even today, creating large reflective surfaces requires careful control of surface curvature and alignment. Without precision tools or optical theory as we understand it today, how ancient engineers achieved this remains unclear. Some medieval Arab sources even describe the mirror as powerful enough to focus sunlight and burn approaching enemy ships, echoing the famous legend of Archimedes supposedly using mirrors to set Roman vessels on fire during the siege of Syracuse. While modern experiments have attempted to recreate such a solar weapon, the results have been mixed. Concentrating sunlight with reflective surfaces can indeed generate intense heat, but doing so at sea against moving targets is extremely difficult. Nevertheless, the persistence of these accounts suggests that the Alexandrian mirror may have been unusually large and technologically impressive, possibly capable of concentrating or directing light in ways that impressed ancient observers. Whether the burning ship story was a real military application, an exaggerated traveller's tale, or a misunderstanding of the lighthouse's optical system remains unresolved. The mystery deepened in 1994 when French underwater archaeologist Frank Goddio led a major underwater survey of Alexandria's eastern harbour. Using sonar mapping and diving expeditions, his team discovered thousands of massive stone blocks, architectural fragments, and colossal statues scattered across the seabed. Some of these stones weighed up to 70 tons, and suggesting that the lighthouse may have been even larger and more elaborate than previously reconstructed. Among the discoveries were fragments of enormous columns, carved blocks from the tower structure, and statues believed to represent members of the Ptolemaic dynasty. The distribution of the debris indicated that the lighthouse likely collapsed during a series of powerful earthquakes that struck the region between the 10th and 14th centuries CE, gradually toppling sections of the structure into the harbour. Further underwater surveys conducted in the early 2000s mapped the ruins in greater detail, revealing how the fallen stones formed a wide archaeological field across the harbour floor. These discoveries confirmed that much of the lighthouse had indeed collapsed directly into the sea, preserving large pieces of its architecture underwater. However, despite these extensive excavations, no confirmed fragments of the legendary reflective mirror have ever been found. If such a device existed, it may have been removed long before the tower collapsed, melted down for metal, or destroyed during centuries of earthquakes and looting. The absence of this crucial component leaves scholars with little more than historical descriptions and speculation. Comparisons with other ancient structures highlight just how unusual the Pharos may have been. For example, Roman lighthouses such as the Tower of Hercules in Spain, one of the few surviving ancient lighthouses, stand only about 55 meters tall, roughly half the estimated height of the Alexandrian Tower. Similarly, most ancient navigation beacons lacked any optical enhancement beyond simple firelight. The Pharos, by contrast, appears to have combined monumental architecture, maritime engineering, and primitive optical technology into a single structure. This fusion of disciplines raises the possibility that Hellenistic engineers possessed a deeper practical understanding of light reflection and long-distance signaling than historians previously assumed. In your opinion, how did the powerful light reflection system of the Lighthouse of Alexandria actually work? Was it simply a massive polished metal mirror, or did ancient engineers possess a far more advanced optical technology than we assume today? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Beneath the desert sands of ancient Egypt lies a place that has long unsettled archaeologists, engineers, and historians alike. Hidden deep within the vast necropolis of Saqqara, not far from the ruins of the ancient capital Memphis, the underground complex known as the Serapeum of Saqqara represents one of the most puzzling feats of stone engineering from the ancient world. First brought to modern attention in 1850 by the French Egyptologist Auguste Mariette, the site initially appeared to be little more than a buried ceremonial passage. Yet as excavations continued, Mariette revealed something extraordinary: a vast subterranean network of tunnels stretching for nearly 3 kilometers, lined with massive chambers that house gigantic stone sarcophagi carved from single blocks of granite and diorite. Yes, each box weighs between 70 and 100 tons, with the lids alone sometimes exceeding 30 tons. Even in an age of cranes and heavy machinery, moving such objects would be a considerable challenge. The fact that these structures were created and placed underground more than 3,000 years ago has raised questions that remain difficult to answer. According to the traditional interpretation, the Serapeum served as the burial place for the sacred Apis bulls associated with the ancient Egyptian deity Apis. These bulls were considered living manifestations of divine power and were mummified with elaborate rituals upon their death. However, the enormous stone containers discovered in the tunnels have puzzled researchers for decades. Each granite sarcophagus measures roughly 3.8 meters in length, more than 2 meters in height, and weighs far more than would be necessary to contain the remains of a single animal. Some of the sarcophagi discovered during early excavations were completely empty, while others contained only fragments of animal bones that appeared broken or disturbed. These inconsistencies have fueled debate about whether the structures served purely ritual purposes or whether they held additional functions that remain unknown. Yet beyond their purpose, it is the extraordinary precision of the stonework that has generated the greatest scientific curiosity. Granite is an extremely hard material, measuring approximately 6 to 7 on the Mohs hardness scale. Even modern stoneworkers require diamond-tipped tools and powerful machinery to cut and polish granite efficiently. Despite this, the surfaces of the Serapeum sarcophagi are remarkably smooth and geometrically precise. Many interior walls appear polished to a mirror-like finish, and the corners form near-perfect right angles. Engineers who have examined the boxes have noted that the flatness of certain surfaces deviates by only fractions of a millimeter across several meters. For comparison, achieving such tolerances in modern manufacturing often requires precision milling machines or industrial grinding tools. Among the most intriguing aspects of the Serapeum is the evidence suggesting sophisticated drilling and cutting techniques. During detailed studies of Egyptian stoneworking in the 19th century, the renowned archaeologist Flinders Petrie carefully examined drill holes and tool marks from multiple ancient sites, including Saqqara, and Petrie observed spiral grooves inside cylindrical holes drilled into hard stone such as granite and diorite. These grooves appeared remarkably regular, indicating a rotational drilling process rather than simple hammering or chiseling. Based on measurements of the groove's spacing, Petrie concluded that the cutting tools seemed to advance through granite at a rate that was surprisingly fast. Far faster than expected if the tools were made only of copper, the material traditionally attributed to ancient Egyptian drills. Experimental archaeology has attempted to reproduce these marks using copper tubes combined with abrasive sand, which is the conventional explanation proposed by Egyptologists. While such techniques can indeed drill into granite, the process is extremely slow and often produces irregular patterns. In contrast, some drill holes observed on ancient artifacts display extremely clean and uniform spiral traces. Petrie famously remarked that the precision suggested a degree of mechanical efficiency, not usually associated with tools made from soft metals. This observation does not necessarily imply lost advanced technology, but it does suggest that the ancient craftsmen may have employed drilling methods far more refined than previously assumed. The mystery deepens when one considers the scale of the Serapeum project. Granite blocks used for the sarcophagi were likely quarried in the region of Aswan, located more than 800 kilometers south of Saqqara along the Nile River. Transporting stones weighing up to 100 tons would have required enormous logistical coordination. Once the blocks reached Saqqara, they had to be carved with extreme precision and then lowered into narrow underground corridors where the chambers were located. Some passageways are only slightly wider than the sarcophagi themselves, leaving little margin for error during installation. Modern engineers examining the site often remark that placing such massive objects in confined subterranean spaces would be difficult even with contemporary equipment. Excavations throughout the 20th century continued to uncover additional details about the complex. Archaeological investigations during the 1960s and 1970s documented the architectural layout of the tunnels, revealing that the main gallery branches into several chambers arranged in a symmetrical pattern. Each chamber houses one of the monumental granite boxes. The tunnels themselves are carved directly into limestone bedrock, with ceilings and walls showing surprisingly straight lines and smooth surfaces. Although chisel marks are visible in some sections, other areas appear unusually uniform, suggesting that the excavation may have involved systematic and carefully planned methods. Researchers have compared the engineering of the Serapeum with other achievements of ancient Egypt, such as the precise stone joints found in the Great Pyramid of Giza. While the pyramids demonstrate remarkable architectural alignment and large-scale construction, the Serapeum reveals something different: the ability to shape enormous blocks of extremely hard stone with extraordinary accuracy. In many respects, the site resembles a gigantic underground gallery of precision-carved granite containers. Yet some scholars have even described it as one of the most technically impressive stoneworking achievements of the ancient world. Despite more than a century and a half of study, several questions remain unresolved. Exactly how the ancient craftsmen drilled, cut, and polished granite with such precision continues to be debated. No advanced drilling devices have been discovered in the archaeological record, and the surviving tools found in Egyptian workshops are primarily made from copper and stone. Yet the physical evidence preserved on the sarcophagi and other artifacts indicates that the techniques used were highly effective, whether through ingenious combinations of abrasives, carefully engineered drilling systems, or methods that have yet to be fully reconstructed. The builders of the Serapeum achieved results that still challenge modern understanding. What do you think? Were these incredible feats the result of lost advanced techniques, or simply human ingenuity pushed to its absolute limits? Share your thoughts in the comments below. In September 1991, two German hikers crossing a glacier in the High Ötztal Alps made a discovery that would become one of the most extraordinary archaeological finds of the modern era. Emerging slowly from melting ice was the naturally preserved body of a prehistoric man later named Ötzi the Iceman. Radiocarbon analysis soon revealed that he had died more than 5,300 years ago, around 3,300 BCE, during the late Copper Age. While the remarkable preservation of his body captured global attention, what truly stunned scientists was the sophisticated technology found beside him, especially a seemingly simple object that turned out to be far ahead of its time: a copper axe. At first glance, the axe appeared to be just another prehistoric tool. Yet detailed laboratory analysis revealed something astonishing. The blade was made from nearly pure copper, about 99.7% copper, according to metallurgical studies conducted at research institutes in Europe. For a tool dating back more than 5 millennia, this level of metal purity is extraordinary. In many parts of Europe during that era, metallurgy was still in its earliest experimental phase, with tools often containing significant impurities. Producing a blade of such purity would have required sophisticated knowledge of smelting techniques, careful control of temperature, and an understanding of how to separate metal from ore. Copper melts at approximately 1084 degrees Celsius, and meaning that prehistoric metallurgists needed furnaces capable of reaching extremely high temperatures using charcoal and controlled airflow. Achieving this level of thermal control without modern technology remains one of the most fascinating questions surrounding early metalworking. The axe itself is elegantly designed. The copper blade measures roughly 9.5 centimeters in length and is inserted into a carefully carved wooden handle made from yew wood. The blade was secured using a combination of birch tar adhesive and tightly wrapped leather bindings. This composite design demonstrates not only knowledge of metallurgy, but also advanced woodworking and adhesive technologies. Birch tar, in particular, requires a controlled heating process in an oxygen-limited environment to extract sticky resin from birch bark, a method that prehistoric communities must have mastered through repeated experimentation. The result was a durable and reliable adhesive strong enough to hold metal and wood together even under the stresses of chopping and cutting. Archaeologists were equally surprised by the rarity of such axes in Europe from this period. Copper was extremely valuable during the Chalcolithic age, and metal tools were often symbols of power or status rather than everyday implements. The fact that Ötzi carried a copper axe suggests he may have been a person of considerable importance, perhaps a leader, a skilled craftsman, or a respected member of his community. Some scholars have compared the significance of such an axe in the Copper Age to the role of high-quality steel tools in the modern industrial world. In other words, it represented cutting-edge technology of its time. Even more intriguing was the question of where the copper came from. In 2017, a major geochemical study analysed the isotopic composition of the metal and traced it to copper ore deposits in southern Italy, particularly in the region of Tuscany. This location lies hundreds of kilometres from the glacier where Ötzi was discovered. Such evidence suggests that long-distance trade networks already existed across prehistoric Europe. Communities separated by mountains and valleys may have exchanged materials, technologies, and knowledge far earlier than previously believed. In comparison, many archaeologists once assumed that complex trade systems only developed much later during the Bronze Age. The axe also challenges long-held assumptions about the timeline of technological development. Traditional historical models suggested that advanced metal tools spread gradually across Europe, becoming common only after bronze metallurgy emerged. Yet Ötzi's axe demonstrates that high-quality copper tools were already being produced and circulated thousands of years earlier. In effect, this single artifact forced researchers to reconsider how quickly ancient societies learned to manipulate metals and how widely such knowledge may have spread. Further excavations and analyses carried out after the discovery revealed even more about Ötzi's technological world. Alongside the axe were numerous other tools and survival items: a flint dagger, a partially completed longbow, arrows with carefully shaped flint tips, and containers made from birch bark. These items indicate that the people of the Alpine region possessed a surprisingly advanced toolkit adapted to mountain life. However, none of these objects captured scientific attention quite like the copper axe, because it symbolized a leap in technological capability that seemed almost out of place for the era. What makes the mystery even deeper is the context of Ötzi's death. CT scans later showed that he died after being struck by an arrow that pierced his shoulder and likely severed a major artery. Despite the apparent violence of his final moments, the copper axe was left behind beside his body. For prehistoric attackers seeking valuable resources, such a metal tool would have been an extremely valuable prize. Its presence raises questions about the circumstances of the encounter. Was it a sudden ambush, a ritual killing, or a conflict in which the attackers fled quickly? Archaeologists continue to debate these possibilities. More than 3 decades after the discovery, the copper axe of Ötzi the Iceman remains one of the most compelling pieces of evidence that prehistoric societies possessed technologies far more sophisticated than once believed. Today, the original artifact is preserved in the South Tyrol Museum of Archaeology, where it continues to be studied using modern scientific techniques, such as high-resolution imaging and metallurgical analysis. Each new study reveals another detail about how ancient craftsmen shaped metal, constructed tools, and navigated the rugged landscapes of the Alpine world. In many ways, the axe is more than just a tool. It is a silent witness to a forgotten technological tradition. It tells a story of early metallurgy, long-distance exchange, and the ingenuity of people who lived thousands of years before written history. And perhaps most intriguingly, it reminds us that the technological abilities of ancient societies may still hold secrets waiting to be uncovered beneath ice, stone, and time itself. Hidden beneath the desert cliffs of the Valley of the Kings lies one of the most remarkable archaeological discoveries in history, the Tomb of Tutankhamun. Known today as Tomb of Tutankhamun, the burial chamber remained sealed for more than 3,000 years until British archaeologist Howard Carter discovered it in 1922. When Carter looked through the first small opening in the doorway, he famously described seeing wonderful things. Inside the tomb, archaeologists uncovered more than 5,000 artifacts including chariots, statues, weapons, jewellery and ritual objects. Yet beyond the treasure itself, one feature continues to puzzle scientists: the extraordinary metallurgical skill displayed in the gold artifacts, especially the famous funerary mask, which reveals a level of craftsmanship that still raises questions about the technological knowledge of ancient Egypt. The golden mask itself weighs roughly 11 kilograms and is composed of high-purity gold, estimated at between 95 and 98%. What makes the object extraordinary is not simply the amount of gold used, but the precision with which it was worked. The mask was created using hammered gold sheets of different thicknesses, carefully shaped and joined together with seams so subtle they are almost invisible even under magnification. Modern metallurgical analysis performed in the 20th and 21st centuries using X-ray fluorescence scanning revealed that different sections of the mask contained slightly different gold alloys, as indicating that ancient craftsmen deliberately adjusted the metal composition to achieve specific colours and structural properties. For example, the face portion of the mask contains a softer gold alloy that allowed finer shaping of facial features, while the heavier sections, such as the Nemes headdress, contain a slightly different mixture designed to maintain structural rigidity. This level of metallurgical planning suggests a deep understanding of material behaviour that would not normally be expected in a civilization working primarily with bronze tools. Even more remarkable is the intricate inlay work embedded across the mask and many other golden artifacts from the tomb. Craftsmen inserted carefully cut pieces of lapis lazuli, quartz, obsidian, turquoise, and coloured glass into extremely narrow grooves within the gold surface. In many cases, the gaps between stone and metal measure less than 1 millimetre, forming perfectly aligned geometric patterns and symbolic designs. Achieving such accuracy on soft gold surfaces would be challenging, even with modern rotary tools, yet ancient Egyptian artisans were working with copper chisels, stone abrasives, and primitive polishing tools. Some decorative elements were produced using a technique known as granulation, where hundreds of microscopic gold beads were fused to the surface of jewellery or ceremonial objects. Many of these beads measure only a fraction of a millimetre in diameter. Modern jewellers know that attaching such granules without visible solder requires extremely precise temperature control during heating. However, there is still debate among researchers about how ancient Egyptian craftsmen managed to control these temperatures so precisely without modern furnaces or thermometers. Some scholars believe organic bonding agents or specialised charcoal furnaces may have been used, yet the exact method remains uncertain. Archaeological excavations conducted during the original 1922 discovery and later conservation studies in the 1960s and early 2000s have provided additional evidence of the extraordinary complexity of these gold objects. When conservators examined the mask more closely during restoration work in 2016, they discovered microscopic tool marks suggesting that artisans used multiple stages of hammering, annealing and polishing to gradually refine the gold surface. Annealing is a metallurgical process in which metal is repeatedly heated and cooled to restore flexibility after deformation. Evidence of this process indicates that Egyptian goldsmiths understood how to prevent metal fatigue thousands of years before modern metallurgy formally described the phenomenon. Comparisons with other ancient cultures from the same period highlight how unusual this level of craftsmanship was. For instance, many gold artifacts from Bronze Age Europe dating to around 1400 BC show visible seams and irregular shaping, while the funerary mask of Tutankhamun, created around 1323 BCE, demonstrates remarkably smooth surfaces and symmetrical proportions, even compared to later civilizations such as classical Greece or early Rome. The scale and technical perfection of the mask remain exceptional. Beyond the mask, the tomb also contained numerous golden coffins and ritual objects that further illustrate the astonishing metalworking capabilities of ancient Egyptian artisans. Tutankhamun's mummy was placed inside 3 nested coffins, the innermost of which was made entirely of solid gold and weighs more than 100 kilograms. The coffin's decorative patterns include delicate engravings, stone inlays, and embossed reliefs that required precise shaping of thick gold sheets. Creating such a massive gold structure without modern casting equipment would have required an enormous amount of labour and technical expertise. Researchers estimate that producing the inner coffin alone could have required thousands of hours of skilled work by specialised craftsmen within royal workshops. Similar levels of craftsmanship can be seen in other objects from the tomb, including gold daggers, ceremonial shrines, and elaborate jewellery sets. One particularly famous dagger discovered within the wrappings of the mummy features a blade made of meteoritic iron, suggesting that Egyptian artisans were capable of working extremely rare materials long before the widespread adoption of iron metallurgy. Despite decades of research, many questions about the production of these objects remain unanswered. Scholars continue to debate how royal workshops organise such complex manufacturing processes, how craftsmen achieved such precise temperature control when working gold, and how large quantities of high-purity gold were refined and transported across ancient Egypt. Some studies suggest that gold used in the mask and other artefacts may have originated from Nubian mines, located hundreds of kilometres south of Egypt, indicating the existence of large-scale mining operations and long-distance trade networks. Additional mysteries surround the tomb itself. Unlike many other royal burials in the Valley of the Kings, Tutankhamun's tomb is relatively small, leading some archaeologists to suspect it may have originally been intended for another royal figure before being hastily adapted, following the young king's sudden death at around 19 years of age. Modern radar scans conducted between 2015 and 2020 have even suggested the possibility of hidden chambers behind the tomb walls, potentially connected to other members of the royal family such as Nefertiti. Although these findings remain controversial, the tomb of Tutankhamun remains extraordinary because it is one of the very few royal burials in Egypt discovered almost completely intact. While most other tombs in the Valley of the Kings were looted in antiquity, the treasures inside this tomb provide a rare glimpse into the technical skill of Egyptian craftsmen during the 18th dynasty. More than 3,300 years after the young pharaoh was buried, modern scientists continue to study these artifacts using advanced analytical technologies. Yet the remarkable precision of the gold craftsmanship found in the tomb still raises a major question. How were ancient artisans, working only with copper and stone tools, able to achieve a level of metallurgical sophistication comparable to the finest goldsmiths of today? How do you think ancient Egyptian craftsmen were able to create gold artifacts with such near-perfect precision in the tomb of Tutankhamun, even though they only had tools made of copper and stone? Share your thoughts or theories in the comments below. In the gentle countryside of Suffolk, England, one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries in European history lies hidden beneath a series of grassy burial mounds at Sutton Hoo Ship Burial. At first glance, the landscape appears peaceful and unremarkable, overlooking the quiet waters of the River Deben. Yet beneath one of these mounds, archaeologists uncovered the ghostly remains of a massive ship burial that has transformed our understanding of early medieval England. The discovery began in 1939 when landowner Edith Pretty invited local archaeologist Basil Brown to investigate the mysterious mounds scattered across her estate. As Brown carefully removed layers of sandy soil, he began to notice rows of iron rivets forming a curved outline in the ground. Gradually, the shape of an enormous vessel emerged. Although the wooden planks had completely decayed due to the acidic soil, the imprint of the ship remained preserved through the pattern of more than 2,600 iron rivets that once held the structure together. From these rivets, archaeologists reconstructed the form of a ship nearly 27 meters long, comparable in size to later Viking vessels. The sophistication of its construction suggested a highly advanced shipbuilding tradition, using clinker-built techniques, where overlapping wooden planks were fastened together to create a strong yet flexible hull. Yet one puzzle remains unresolved. The burial mound stands on a hill far from deep water, meaning that the massive ship, likely weighing several tons, had somehow been transported from the river to the burial site. And exactly how early 7th century builders managed this logistical challenge remains unknown. Inside the center of the ship, archaeologists uncovered a burial chamber containing an astonishing collection of treasure. More than 260 artifacts made from gold, silver, iron, garnet, and glass. Among the most iconic discoveries was the elaborate Sutton Hoo helmet, whose dramatic face mask has become one of the most recognizable symbols of the Anglo-Saxon world. However, beyond the visual beauty of these objects lies an even deeper mystery, one that involves the remarkable metallurgical technology used to produce them. Modern scientific analysis has revealed that the craftsmen responsible for the Sutton Hoo treasures possessed an astonishing level of technical skill, are far more sophisticated than historians once believed existed in early medieval Northern Europe. The metalwork discovered at Sutton Hoo demonstrates mastery of several complex techniques, including cloisonné inlay, granulation, filigree, and advanced alloy control. Cloisonné, one of the most striking decorative methods found in the treasure, involved soldering extremely thin strips of gold onto a metal surface to create tiny compartments. These compartments were then filled with carefully cut garnet stones, producing intricate geometric and animal designs. In many of the Sutton Hoo objects, these gold partitions measure only 1 to 2 millimeters wide, yet they are arranged with remarkable symmetry. Even more impressive is the discovery that the garnets were backed with microscopic gold foil stamped with cross-hatched patterns. These patterns acted like tiny mirrors, reflecting light through the semi-transparent stones and dramatically enhancing their brilliance. Under modern microscopes, some of these reflective foils measure less than 1/10 of a millimeter thick. The precision required to produce and position such delicate components raises an important question. How did 7th century artisans achieve this level of micro-scale craftsmanship without modern optical tools? Further evidence of advanced metallurgy appears in the composition of the metals themselves. Scientific tests conducted using X-ray fluorescence and electron microscopy have shown that many of the Sutton Hoo gold artifacts contain carefully balanced mixtures of gold, silver, and copper. These alloys were likely designed to control both the color and hardness of the finished objects. In several pieces, the gold purity exceeds 95%, suggesting access to highly refined raw materials. Even more remarkable is the use of gold granulation, tiny spheres of gold attached to surfaces to create textured decorative patterns. Some of these granules measure less than 0.3 millimeters in diameter. Attaching such particles required precise temperature control during heating. Too much heat would melt the granules entirely, while too little heat would prevent them from bonding with the base metal. Achieving this delicate balance suggests that Anglo-Saxon craftsmen possessed a sophisticated understanding of metallurgical processes and furnace temperatures. When compared with contemporary metalwork from other regions of Europe during the same period, the Sutton Hoo artifacts appear exceptionally refined. Merovingian jewellery from continental Europe often uses similar garnet cloisonné techniques, but typically with larger compartments and simpler geometric layouts. The Sutton Hoo pieces, by contrast, contain far denser and more intricate arrangements of stones and metal partitions. Some decorative panels include dozens of tiny garnets arranged in complex animal patterns known as the Germanic animal style. This level of artistic and technical complexity suggests the presence of highly specialized craftsmen working within elite workshops. Yet archaeologists have discovered very little direct evidence of such workshops in early Anglo-Saxon England, leaving open the possibility that some objects may have been produced by travelling artisans or through international trade networks. Yes, trade itself forms another fascinating aspect of the Sutton Hoo mystery. Several silver bowls found in the burial have been identified as imports from the Byzantine Empire, originating thousands of kilometres away in the eastern Mediterranean. One of these bowls bears Greek inscriptions typical of 6th century Byzantine craftsmanship. Meanwhile, geological analysis of the garnet gemstone suggests that some may have come from mines in India or Sri Lanka. If correct, this would indicate that the materials used to create the Sutton Hoo treasures travelled across vast trade routes stretching from South Asia to northern Europe. Such connections challenge the long-standing notion that early Anglo-Saxon England was isolated after the fall of the Roman Empire. Another enduring mystery concerns the identity of the individual buried within the ship. No skeleton was found during the original excavation because the acidic soil had dissolved all human remains. However, chemical analysis of the soil in later studies detected elevated phosphate levels in the centre of the burial chamber, indicating that a body had once been present. Many historians believe the grave may belong to Redwald, the powerful king of East Anglia who died in the early 7th century. Yet without inscriptions or physical remains, this identification remains uncertain. Subsequent archaeological campaigns have continued to shed new light on the Sutton Hoo site. Excavations conducted during the 1960s and 70s revealed additional burial mounds containing smaller ship graves and cremation burials. More recently, advanced survey techniques in the 21st century have identified traces of nearby Anglo-Saxon settlements, suggesting that Sutton Hoo was part of a larger ceremonial and political landscape rather than an isolated tomb. Today the site stands as one of the most important archaeological discoveries in Britain. Above all, the extraordinary metallurgical sophistication displayed in its treasures, microscopic gold foils, carefully controlled alloys, and granules smaller than a grain of sand, continues to puzzle researchers. Even with modern tools, reproducing some of these techniques remains extremely challenging. For this reason, Sutton Hoo is not only a royal burial, but also a technological mystery, hinting that the craftsmen of early Anglo-Saxon England possessed knowledge and skills far more advanced than historians once imagined. How do you think Anglo-Saxon craftsmen more than 1,300 years ago were able to create such extraordinarily advanced metallurgical techniques, some of which are still difficult to replicate even with modern technology? Share your thoughts or theories in the comments below. The Jiu ruins in northwestern China represent one of the most unusual and technically intriguing ancient cities ever discovered along the historic Silk Road. Located near the modern city of Turpan in Xinjiang, the ruins sit on a narrow natural plateau formed between two ancient river valleys. The plateau itself stretches roughly 1.7 kilometers in length and about 300 meters in width, creating what appears from the air like a natural island rising from the desert floor. Archaeological evidence suggests that the city was first established more than 2,000 years ago, possibly during the period of the early Cheshi Kingdom, and later flourished as an important administrative and trade center linking China with Central Asia. Yet what makes Jiaohe truly extraordinary is not only its age or its strategic location, but the mysterious engineering methods that allowed an entire city built primarily from earth to survive for millennia in one of the harshest desert climates in Asia. Unlike most ancient cities that relied heavily on stone blocks or fired brick, Jiaohe was constructed largely from rammed earth and mud brick, materials that in most environments deteriorate rapidly. Normally, buildings made from mud brick begin to crumble after only a few centuries unless they are constantly maintained. Even many famous ancient earthen settlements across the Middle East and Central Asia have eroded into little more than low mounds. However, at Jiaohe the remains of streets, walls, temples and residential structures are still clearly visible today, with some walls standing 8 to 10 meters high, despite having been exposed to more than 2,000 years of wind, temperature fluctuations and desert erosion. This durability has puzzled archaeologists for decades and has led researchers to closely study the construction techniques used by the city's ancient inhabitants. One explanation involves the unique soil composition of the Turpan Basin, where the ruins are located. Geological surveys have shown that the plateau is composed largely of compacted loess soil, a fine wind-blown sediment that can become extremely dense when compressed. When ancient builders shaped the structures of Jiaohe, they took advantage of this natural property by cutting directly into the plateau and then reinforcing the remaining sections with additional layers of rammed earth. In effect, the city was not simply built on the plateau, it was carved from the plateau itself, leaving thick earthen walls that were part of the original landform. This method created structural stability comparable to natural rock formations. Some archaeologists have noted that this technique resembles the rock-cut architecture of places such as Petra in Jordan or Lalibela in Ethiopia, where entire structures were carved from solid stone. Yet the remarkable difference is that Jiaohe achieved a similar architectural permanence using earth rather than rock, which makes its survival far more surprising. Another factor believed to contribute to the city's longevity is the sophisticated rammed earth construction method used by its builders. In rammed earth technology, layers of moist soil are compressed between wooden forms to create dents, these solid walls. Evidence from excavations conducted during the 20th and early 21st centuries shows that the walls at Jiaohe were compacted in repeated layers, each only a few centimeters thick, producing a density far greater than that of ordinary mud brick construction. Some samples analysed by Chinese archaeologists revealed compression levels approaching those of modern engineered earth structures. Researchers from Xinjiang Archaeological Institutes have also found traces of organic fibres such as straw or plant fragments mixed into the soil. These fibres likely acted as reinforcement, similar to the way modern builders add fibres to concrete to prevent cracking. However, the exact proportions of these mixtures remain uncertain, and scientists still debate whether additional natural binders were used. Comparisons with other ancient earthen cities make Jiaohe's durability even more striking. For example, many settlements built from mud brick in Mesopotamia, once among the largest cities in the world, have largely collapsed into indistinct archaeological mounds. Even the impressive mud brick citadels of Central Asia, such as those in Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan, have suffered significant erosion despite being younger than Jiaohe. Yet large portions of Jiaohe's streets, courtyards, temples and administrative halls remain recognizable today. Some archaeologists argue that the city's design may have intentionally minimized structural stress, because many buildings were carved downward into the plateau rather than stacked upward. The structures had low centers of gravity and thick earthen walls integrated with the surrounding land, reducing the risk of collapse. Excavations carried out since the 1950s have uncovered a surprisingly complex urban layout that further demonstrates the engineering knowledge of its builders. Archaeologists discovered a central administrative district, residential quarters, storage facilities, and Buddhist monasteries arranged along a carefully planned network of streets. Some of the main streets measure 6 to 8 meters wide, indicating that the city once supported significant traffic and trade. The organization of these streets suggests deliberate urban planning rather than organic growth, which is remarkable given the constraints of the narrow plateau. Surveys conducted with aerial photography and satellite imagery in recent decades have revealed that many of the streets run in long, nearly straight lines across the plateau, reinforcing the idea that the builders possessed advanced surveying techniques for their time. The religious architecture of Jiaohe also illustrates the unusual construction methods used in the city. Several Buddhist stupas and monastery complexes were created by removing earth around a central core, leaving behind massive earthen towers that served as sacred structures. This approach resembles the sculpting of monumental stone temples in other parts of the world, yet at Jiaohe it was achieved using compacted earth. The survival of these structures raises further questions about how ancient builders prevented erosion and structural collapse. Some researchers suggest that the extremely dry climate of the Turpan Basin, where annual rainfall is extremely low, were helped preserve the buildings by limiting water damage. Still, even in such climates, earthen architecture typically requires maintenance, which means the long-term preservation of Jiaohe structures may also reflect the extraordinary effectiveness of its construction techniques. Modern archaeological studies continue to investigate these mysteries. In the early 21st century, conservation teams conducted detailed structural analyses and soil sampling across the site. Their findings confirmed that certain walls retained densities and compressive strengths far higher than those found in typical historical earthen architecture. These results support the theory that Jiaohe's builders possessed a sophisticated understanding of how to manipulate local materials to achieve structural durability. Yet despite decades of research, scholars still cannot fully explain how the ancient inhabitants achieved such consistent quality across an entire city. The Jiaohe ruins reveal how ancient builders adapted to a harsh desert environment using simple materials. Despite being made mainly from earth, the city's walls, streets, and temples have survived for thousands of years. This remarkable durability continues to challenge modern understanding of ancient construction techniques. Could ancient engineers have possessed construction knowledge that modern science still doesn't fully understand? What is your theory about the mystery of Jiaohe? Share it in the comments below. Monteverde, located in southern Chile near the modern city of Puerto Montt, is one of the most controversial and fascinating archaeological sites ever discovered in the Americas. For decades, scientists believe that the first humans arrived in the New World roughly 13,000 years ago, associated with the famous Clovis culture of North America. According to this traditional model, small groups of hunters migrated from Siberia into Alaska, across the Bering Land Bridge during the last ice age, and gradually spread southward through an ice-free corridor in Canada. However, the discoveries at Monteverde have forced archaeologists to reconsider this entire narrative. Excavations led by American archaeologist Tom Dillahay beginning in the late 1970s revealed a remarkably well-preserved settlement buried beneath layers of peat and sediment. Radiocarbon dating of charcoal, wooden structures, animal bones, and plant remains consistently produced ages of around 14,500 years, placing the site at least 1,000 years earlier than the Clovis culture and thousands of kilometers farther south. The implications were extraordinary. If humans were already living in southern Chile 14.5 millennia ago, they must have entered the Americas far earlier than previously believed. What makes Monteverde particularly unique is the exceptional preservation of organic materials rarely found in archaeological sites of such antiquity. Because the camp was eventually covered by waterlogged peat, delicate objects such as wooden tools, plant fibers, and fragments of animal hide survived for thousands of years. Archaeologists uncovered the remains of a long communal structure, roughly 20 meters in length, supported by wooden posts and likely covered with animal skins or plant materials. This shelter appears to have been divided into multiple sections, possibly housing several families. Nearby, researchers found hearths, cooking areas, and scattered tools made from stone, bone, and wood. The level of organization suggests a community that understood how to construct durable shelters and manage shared living spaces, even in the cold and wet conditions of the late Ice Age. Such evidence challenges the stereotype that early hunter-gatherers in the Americas lived only in temporary camps with minimal technology. Another remarkable discovery at Monteverde involves the wide range of plant remains recovered from the site. Researchers identified more than 45 different species, including edible plants, medicinal herbs, and even seaweed transported from the Pacific coast, approximately 60 kilometers away. The presence of coastal seaweed so far inland suggests that the inhabitants either traveled long distances or maintained connections with groups living near the ocean. Some of these marine plants possess natural antibacterial properties, leading scientists to speculate that the people of Monteverde may have had early knowledge of medicinal resources. Compared with other Ice Age camps in North America, which often yield primarily stone tools and animal bones, Monteverde reveals a far more complex picture of human adaptation, diet, and ecological knowledge. Yet the most profound mystery surrounding Monteverde lies not in the artifacts themselves, but in the question of how these early people arrived there in the first place. The traditional Clovis first theory once suggested that humans entered North America around 13,000 years ago and slowly migrated southward through an ice-free corridor between massive glaciers covering much of Canada. But Monteverde's confirmed age of about 14,500 years makes that scenario difficult to explain. If people had already reached southern Chile by that time, they would have had to travel nearly 15,000 kilometers from Alaska in a relatively short period. Moreover, geological evidence indicates that the supposed ice-free corridor may not have been fully passable until around 13,000 years ago, meaning it might not have been available when the Monteverde settlement was already thriving. This contradiction has led many researchers to consider an alternative hypothesis known as the Pacific Coastal Migration Route. According to this theory, the first Americans may have traveled along the western coastline of the Americas by following marine ecosystems rich in fish, shellfish, and sea mammals. Small groups could have moved gradually southward using simple watercraft or by traveling along beaches and coastal plains that existed during the lower sea levels of the Ice Age. In this model, people could have spread rapidly along the Pacific Rim, reaching regions as far south as Chile much earlier than previously imagined. Supporters of this idea point to the discovery of coastal resources at Monteverde, such as seaweed and marine plants, as possible indirect evidence that early settlers were familiar with coastal environments. However, proving the coastal migration theory is extremely difficult. At the end of the last Ice Age, rising sea levels submerged vast stretches of ancient shoreline under the Pacific Ocean. Many of the campsites that early travelers might have used are now underwater, making them nearly impossible to locate. This means that Monteverde remains one of the few surviving clues to a much larger and mostly invisible migration story. And as some archaeologists have suggested that if similar sites could be discovered along ancient coastal routes in North or Central America, they might provide stronger evidence for this early maritime movement. The debate surrounding Monteverde intensified during the 1990s, when a group of leading archaeologists visited the site to examine the evidence directly. Initially skeptical, many of them were eventually convinced by the quality of the data, including carefully documented excavation layers and consistent radiocarbon dates. In 1997, Monteverde was widely accepted as a legitimate pre-Clovis site, fundamentally altering the timeline of human settlement in the Americas. Since then, additional research has hinted that even older layers may exist at the site, sometimes referred to as Monteverde I, which could date back as far as 18,000 years. If these earlier levels are confirmed, they would push the human presence in South America even further into the past, deepening the mystery of how and when the first people arrived. In comparison with other famous early sites in the Americas, Monteverde stands out both for its age and for its extraordinary preservation. Sites associated with the Clovis culture, such as those found in the United States and Canada, are typically characterized by distinctive fluted spear points used for hunting large Ice Age animals. Monteverde, by contrast, contains a much more diverse collection of tools and materials, reflecting a broader adaptation to forests, rivers, and coastal ecosystems. This difference suggests that early American populations may have been more culturally and technologically diverse than once believed. Monteverde challenges long-held ideas about when and how humans first reached the Americas. The site suggests that people may have travelled vast distances and adapted to new environments much earlier than once believed. Yet the biggest mystery remains. How did these ancient travellers reach southern South America so early? Whether by coastal journeys, inland routes, or paths still unknown, Monteverde remains one of the most intriguing puzzles in human history. In your opinion, which seems more plausible, that ancient humans migrated along the Pacific coast using primitive boats, or that they reached the Americas through a completely different route that science has not yet discovered? Share your thoughts in the comments below. In the southeastern region of the Iberian Peninsula, where barren Rocky Mountains meet the seasonally dry Andarax River, the fortified complex of Los Millares has stood for more than 5 millennia as a silent remnant of an era when humans first began to organize complex societies, exploit metals, and, most importantly, construct defensive works far beyond what their age should have allowed. Upon its discovery, Los Millares shocked archaeologists not only because of its scale, but also because of a level of sophistication far exceeding what anyone believed an early Bronze Age community capable of achieving. 3 large defensive walls encircled the settlement, each equipped with watchtowers, deep ditches, and carefully placed gate systems intended to control the approach of any enemy. These were not temporary defensive barriers. They were symbols of prolonged anxiety, serious military preparedness, and a society accustomed to the constant threat of external attack. The stacked stone layers, the curved wall segments designed to create advantageous firing angles, and the watchtowers positioned at strategic points reveal that the inhabitants of Los Millares not only knew how to defend themselves, but also understood the art of warfare. Inside those walls, the lives of the Los Millares inhabitants emerge through traces of smelting furnaces, copper tools, clearly organized residential zones, and more than 80 dolmen tombs surrounding the settlement. Notably, these tombs were arranged according to specific rules, possibly linked to astronomical observation or religious rites. Yet, this suggests that the community was not only advanced militarily, but also possessed a rich spiritual life and a complex belief system. The grave goods indicate a socially stratified community, where individuals of higher status were buried in larger, more elaborate tombs. However, despite signs of hierarchy, Los Millares left no evidence of a palace or any clearly defined centre of political authority. There is no walled-off area reserved for a single leader, nor any tomb overwhelmingly superior to others like the royal graves seen in other civilizations. This raises an intriguing question. Who commanded the construction of this entire fortress? A powerful chief, a council of elders, or a political structure entirely different from anything we know? Fair copper metallurgy was the defining factor that elevated Los Millares into an economic centre of the Iberian region. The smelting furnaces found here prove they mastered the techniques of extracting, heating, moulding, and casting copper. Copper artefacts in the Los Millares style have been found at distant sites, indicating a far-reaching trade network. This reinforces the idea that Los Millares was not merely a village, but a regional hub of economic, religious, and military influence. Yet this very wealth may have made it a target for surrounding communities, those seeking to seize its resources, technologies, and power. The discovery of numerous arrowheads, weapons, and burn marks on the walls indicates that the inhabitants had to defend themselves against repeated assaults. The construction of 3 walls was no accident. It was the accumulated response of many generations to dangers long forgotten by modern researchers. Yet amid all this prosperity and preparedness, what makes Los Millares one of Europe's greatest archaeological mysteries is how it vanished. Suddenly, quietly, and almost without leaving a trace of the real cause. Around 2300 BCE, this vast settlement was abandoned. There is no thick ash layer pointing to a catastrophic fire, no scattered bodies indicating a massacre, and no evidence of a large-scale epidemic. The inhabitants of Los Millares appear to have left in an orderly fashion, as though following a prearranged plan, taking what they needed and never returning. There are no signs of chaos, no hastily abandoned objects, no half-empty storage areas, no signs of despair. The disappearance is calm to the point of being unsettling. Many hypotheses have been proposed, yet none sufficiently explain the mystery. The first suggests climate change. Iberia experienced a prolonged drought during that period, leaving the land barren, water scarce, and crops unproductive. This could have forced the inhabitants to migrate to more fertile areas. However, geological studies show that climate change did not occur suddenly enough to compel them to abandon such a major centre, and if climate truly were the cause, why did this resourceful and resilient community, one that had thrived for centuries, not attempt to adapt? The second hypothesis suggests copper depletion. If the main resource had run out, the economy of Los Millares would have collapsed. Yet modern geological surveys indicate that copper deposits still exist around the site. Moreover, this community already maintained an extensive trade network that would have allowed them to import metal if necessary. Thus, this explanation is also unconvincing. The third hypothesis concerns warfare. Perhaps they were not destroyed in a single battle, but worn down by prolonged pressure from newly emerging groups or more aggressive societies. These groups might have gradually weakened Los Millares, reducing manpower and undermining their ability to maintain large fortifications. But if warfare were truly the cause, why is there no clear evidence of destruction? Why did the inhabitants leave in order rather than die on sight or flee in panic? These unanswered questions leave the warfare hypothesis incomplete. The most debated hypothesis involves the rise of the El Argar culture, a powerful society with clear hierarchical structures and advanced metallurgical skills. El Argar emerged immediately after the disappearance of Los Millares, leading many scholars to believe that the inhabitants were absorbed into this new culture. Yet again, there is no direct evidence of conquest, no extensive destruction, no mass violence, and no abrupt architectural or material shift at Los Millares indicating El Argar occupation. If Los Millares people did join El Argar, then the process must have been gradual and peaceful, but this still does not explain why they abandoned an economic, religious, and military centre built over generations. What deepens the mystery is the complete absence of any evidence indicating that they built a new settlement elsewhere. No second Los Millares has been found, nor any clear migration trail. The community seems to have dissolved into space and time, leaving no direct descendants, no folklore, no cultural memory. The dolmen tombs fell out of use. The furnaces went cold, the walls remained standing, but no footsteps passed through them again. A once powerful, wealthy and complex society vanished into absolute silence. A silence so profound that many archaeologists believe we are still missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. More speculative theories suggest internal conflict, a shift in religious belief requiring abandonment of the old settlement, or even environmental disasters such as earthquakes or severe erosion. But all of these remain conjecture. No definitive evidence supports any of them, and it is precisely this void where archaeological reasoning cannot reach that makes Los Millares extraordinary. A massive fortress built against unseen enemies, a metallurgical centre of regional influence, a socially sophisticated and spiritually rich community, yet one that evaporated within a relatively short time, leaving behind only mute stone walls. Those walls reveal nothing of their final story. They stand, worn by wind and layered with centuries of dust, as though guarding a truth modern humans are not yet equipped to uncover. And until that missing piece is found, the sudden disappearance of Los Millares will remain one of the greatest unanswered questions in European archaeology. What do you think truly caused a powerful civilization like Los Millares to disappear completely without leaving a trace? Share your thoughts in the comments below. High above the dry savanna landscapes of central Tanzania lies one of Africa's most enigmatic archaeological treasures, the Kondoa rock art sites. Scattered across the rocky hills of the Kondoa-Irangi region, this vast complex contains more than 200 decorated rock shelters, some hidden deep within sandstone cliffs, and others overlooking valleys that have changed little since prehistoric times. At first glance, these paintings appear simple. Figures of hunters, animals, ritual dancers, and geometric symbols painted in shades of red and white. Yet behind their apparent simplicity lies a technological mystery that has puzzled archaeologists, chemists, and historians for decades. How did prehistoric people create pigments capable of surviving on exposed rock surfaces for thousands of years? Archaeological research suggests that the earliest paintings in Kondoa may date back as far as 10,000 years, produced by hunter-gatherer communities who once inhabited the region, long before pastoral societies arrived. Later layers of art, sometimes painted directly over earlier images, indicate that the shelters continued to be used for ritual or symbolic purposes for millennia. Excavations conducted throughout the 20th century, particularly during surveys in the 1950s and 1960s, revealed stone tools, hearth remains, and fragments of ochre pigment scattered across habitation floors beneath the painted walls. These discoveries confirm that the shelters were not merely galleries but active living spaces where people gathered, prepared materials, and likely performed ceremonies connected to the imagery above them. Among all the mysteries surrounding Kondoa, the most astonishing is the extraordinary durability of its pigments. The majority of the paintings were created using red ochre, a naturally occurring iron oxide mineral widely used by prehistoric cultures around the world. In theory, ochre alone should not survive for such immense periods when exposed to rain, sunlight, and temperature fluctuations, yet many Kondoa paintings remain strikingly visible today, their red tones still vivid against pale sandstone surfaces even after thousands of years of environmental exposure. For comparison, many modern paints applied to outdoor stone structures begin fading within only a few decades, or even some industrial pigments designed for architectural durability rarely remain intact for more than a few centuries without restoration. The survival of Kondoa's prehistoric pigments therefore raises a compelling technological question. What formula allowed ancient artists to produce such long-lasting colour? Scientific investigations have attempted to answer this question by analysing microscopic samples from the paintings. Studies carried out during conservation programs in the late 20th century found that the pigments contained finely ground hematite particles, the iron-rich mineral responsible for the deep red colour of ochre. However, mineral pigment alone cannot explain the remarkable adhesion observed in Kondoa paintings, or in many locations the colour does not simply sit on the rock surface, but appears to have penetrated slightly into the sandstone itself, forming a thin but resilient layer that resists erosion. This suggests that prehistoric artists likely mixed the mineral powder with organic binders capable of strengthening the pigment and helping it bond with the rock. Researchers have proposed several possible binding agents, including animal fat, plant resin, egg proteins, or blood. Similar organic mixtures have been documented in prehistoric art elsewhere, such as the famous cave paintings of Lascaux in France or Altamira in Spain. However, Kondoa presents a unique challenge for scientists. After thousands of years in a tropical climate, most organic compounds would have degraded completely, leaving only faint chemical traces that are difficult to identify. As a result, no definitive recipe has been confirmed. The exact mixture used by Kondoa's ancient artist remains unknown, making it one of the most intriguing technological puzzles in prehistoric art. Another factor contributing to the preservation of these paintings may be the geological properties of the rock shelters themselves. Many of the artworks were created beneath natural overhangs that protect them from direct rainfall. The sandstone surfaces also possess a slightly porous texture, which may have allowed pigments mixed with liquid binders to seep into microscopic cavities before hardening. Over time, mineralization processes could have further stabilized the pigment layer, effectively sealing the color into the stone. Even with these protective factors, however, the longevity of the images still exceeds what scientists typically expect from prehistoric materials. The paintings themselves provide additional insight into the societies that created them. Many scenes depict hunters pursuing animals such as antelope, giraffes, or elephants, suggesting that the earliest artists were part of mobile hunting groups who relied on wildlife for survival. Other panels show rows of human figures dancing or holding hands, possibly representing communal rituals or spiritual ceremonies. Particularly fascinating are abstract geometric patterns, circles, grids, and intersecting lines that appear repeatedly across multiple shelters. These motifs may have held symbolic meaning, perhaps connected to cosmology, territory, or memory systems used by early communities. Archaeological evidence indicates that the Kondoa shelters were used by several cultural groups over time. The earliest paintings are often attributed to ancient hunter-gatherers, related to the ancestors of modern San peoples of southern Africa. Later artwork may have been produced by pastoral communities who migrated into the region several thousand years ago. Even today, the local Sandawe people maintain oral traditions that link some of the paintings to ritual practices involving trance dances and spiritual communication. While these traditions cannot directly explain the oldest images, they suggest a long continuity between ancient symbolic art and living cultural heritage. The scale of the Kondoa rock art landscape further adds to its mystery. Spread across a region covering hundreds of square kilometers, the painted shelters form an immense open-air archive of human creativity spanning many millennia. In 2006, the site was officially recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site due to its exceptional cultural significance. Conservation efforts now focus on protecting the fragile artworks from weathering, vandalism, and modern environmental pressures. Yet despite decades of research, one question continues to fascinate scientists and historians alike. How did prehistoric artists, working with stone tools and natural minerals, manage to create pigments that have endured for thousands of years? In the silent shelters of Kondoa rock art sites, the secret remains hidden within ancient pigments. The red figures of hunters and dancers still survive after thousands of years, preserved by a technique that science has not fully understood. Whether through organic binders, mineral chemistry, or unique environmental conditions, the artist of Kondoa created images that have outlived the civilizations that made them. What do you think allowed the paintings at Kondoa to survive for thousands of years? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Perched dramatically on the rim of an extinct volcano in northeastern Thailand, Phanom Rung Historical Park stands as one of the most extraordinary architectural achievements of the ancient Khmer civilization. Built between the 10th and 13th centuries during the height of the Khmer Empire, the temple complex was dedicated primarily to the Hindu god Shiva, and served both as a sacred pilgrimage site and a symbolic representation of Mount Meru, the mythical centre of the universe in Hindu cosmology. Yet beyond its religious significance, Phanom Rung has become an enduring subject of fascination for archaeologists and historians because of the remarkable engineering, astronomical alignment, and construction techniques embedded within its design. Features that still raise questions about how ancient builders achieved such precision with the limited tools of their era. The temple sits approximately 400 meters above the surrounding plains, positioned atop the remnants of a dormant volcanic cone that last erupted hundreds of thousands of years ago. From an engineering perspective, this location alone presents a formidable challenge. Most of the structure is built from sandstone blocks that were quarried from locations estimated to be more than 50 kilometers away. Archaeological surveys conducted by the Thai Fine Arts Department in the 1970s and 1980s suggest that many of these blocks weigh several hundred kilograms, with some reaching close to a metric ton. Transporting such heavy materials across long distances and then hauling them up a steep volcanic hill would have required an advanced logistical system. Some scholars have proposed that wooden sledges, elephant labour and earthen ramps might have been used. But unlike the well-documented ramp systems discovered near the Great Pyramid of Giza, no definitive archaeological evidence of large transport ramps has been found around Phanom Rung. This absence of clear construction infrastructure has fueled ongoing debate about the exact methods used by Khmer engineers nearly 1,000 years ago. Equally impressive is the precision with which the temple's sandstone blocks were carved and assembled. Many walls within the sanctuary are constructed without the use of mortar, relying instead on carefully shaped stones fitted tightly together. Even today, the seams between some blocks are so narrow that inserting a thin blade is nearly impossible. This technique resembles the remarkable stone-fitting methods seen at Sacsayhuaman in the Andes, where massive stones were cut and interlocked with astonishing accuracy centuries before modern surveying equipment existed. The similarity has often led researchers to question whether ancient builders in different parts of the world independently developed comparable engineering principles to achieve long-lasting structural stability. Despite centuries of tropical weather, seasonal monsoon rains, and minor seismic activity, much of Phanom Rung's core architecture remains structurally sound, testimony to the effectiveness of its original design. However, the most astonishing feature of Phanom Rung, and the aspect that continues to intrigue scientists the most, is its extraordinary astronomical alignment. The temple complex is built along a long axial pathway, stretching from the grand eastern entrance toward the central sanctuary. Along this path stand a series of 15 doorways aligned in a perfectly straight line. During specific days of the year, when the position of the sun coincides precisely with the orientation of the temple's axis, sunlight passes directly through all 15 doorways at once, creating a glowing corridor of light that runs through the heart of the structure. This rare phenomenon occurs 4 times each year, twice during sunrise and twice during sunset, when the sun's position aligns with the temple's east-west axis. On these days, the rising or setting sun appears perfectly framed within the sanctuary, illuminating the inner chamber with a dramatic beam of light that seems almost deliberately engineered for ceremonial effect. Modern astronomical calculations indicate that achieving such an alignment would require extremely accurate measurements of solar movement along the horizon. The Earth's axial tilt causes the sun's rising and setting points to shift throughout the year, meaning the builders had to understand the seasonal path of the sun in order to align the temple correctly. Scholars studying the site have suggested that Khmer architects may have observed solar cycles for many years, possibly decades, before finalizing the layout of the temple. Excavations and restoration work carried out during the late 20th century revealed that the entire complex is oriented approximately 5 degrees north of due east, a slight adjustment that appears to have been intentionally designed to produce the famous 15-door alignment effect. Such precision suggests not only architectural skill, but also a sophisticated knowledge of astronomy. The phenomenon has often been compared to the solar alignments of Stonehenge, where the rising sun during the summer solstice aligns with the heel stone and the central axis of the monument. Similar solar engineering can also be seen in Mesoamerican structures like El Castillo, Temple of Kukulkan, where shadows during the equinox create the illusion of a serpent descending the pyramid staircase. Yet what makes Phanom Rung unique is the sheer number of architectural elements involved in the alignment. 15 separate doorways, each constructed at different stages of the temple's development, had to remain precisely aligned across a distance of nearly 300 meters. Even a small deviation of a few centimeters in any doorway could disrupt the effect entirely. The fact that the phenomenon still occurs today indicates that the builders achieved a level of geometric accuracy that rivals modern surveying methods. Archaeological investigations conducted throughout the 20th century have attempted to determine whether the alignment was intentional or merely coincidental. In 1971, Thai archaeologists began systematic restoration of the complex, carefully reconstructing collapsed sections using a method known as anastylosis, reassembling original stones in their original positions. During this process, researchers confirmed that the alignment was embedded within the original architectural plan rather than the result of later modifications. Additional studies using satellite imagery and digital modelling in the early 21st century have further confirmed that the temple's axis corresponds precisely with the solar events observed today. These findings strongly suggest that the builders intentionally designed Phanom Rung as both a religious sanctuary and a symbolic solar monument. Despite these discoveries, many questions remain unanswered. Historians still debate how Khmer architects measured solar angles with such precision in an era before telescopes, compasses, or modern mathematical instruments. Some theories propose the use of simple gnomons, vertical sticks used to track shadows, but achieving the accuracy required for the 15-door alignment would likely demand long-term observational records and advanced geometric planning. Others suggest that the alignment may have had ritual significance tied to the worship of Shiva, possibly symbolizing the passage of divine energy through the temple during certain celestial events. Yet no surviving inscriptions at the site clearly explain the builder's intentions. How do you think ancient builders were able to align 15 doorways so precisely with the movement of the sun nearly 1,000 years ago? Was it advanced observation of astronomy, lost engineering knowledge, or something we still don't fully understand? Where are you watching this video from and what time of day is it for you? Share your location and time in the comments below. Pucara de Quito Cliff Fortress is one of the most impressive ancient cliff fortresses along the edge of the Atacama Desert, where wind, sun, and unforgiving terrain together create an environment seemingly impossible for a large-scale defensive structure to exist. Yet the ancient Atacameño people built here a complex system of fortifications so sophisticated that even today archaeologists, architects and engineers remain astonished by their boldness. The entire stronghold clings to the mountainside, rising in multiple tiers that blend natural landforms with remarkable material craftsmanship. What surprises researchers most is the dry stone walling technique, in which stones are fitted so tightly without mortar that the structure has survived for centuries in a place where even the smallest error could have caused collapse. The fortress walls resemble lines etched into the mountainside, assembled from countless stones of different sizes locked together so precisely that gaps are nearly non-existent. From afar, the walls merge into the desert hillside. Up close, one can see the meticulous selection, shaping, rotation and placement of each stone to self-lock and distribute pressure evenly throughout the structure. There is no trace of mortar, no artificial binding agent, only weight, shape, and the impeccable calculations of ancient builders. Many wall segments lie on steep slopes where transporting material is a challenge even today. Yet the ancestors of Atacama not only moved the stones, but arranged them into formations as solid as modern defensive works, resisting powerful winds, landslides, and geological shifts for hundreds of years. This raises a profound question. How much did they understand about geology and gravity? Did they possess experimental methods, measurement techniques, or inherited knowledge that remains undiscovered today? While major civilizations such as the Inca or Tiwanaku are known for refined stonemasonry, Pucara de Quito displays a very different stylistic identity. The stones were not polished smooth, but left partially natural, enhancing their ability to grip one another. Even so, the level of tightness between layers is astonishing. Some researchers propose that the builders used a technique based on splitting the stones along natural grain lines so they would interlock with bedrock behind them, forming an exterior wall that acted almost like a protective shell. This also helped the walls absorb impact from ancient weapons or mild seismic activity common in the Andes. Some theories suggest the Atacama people experimented with many arrangements before achieving the optimal configuration, yet archaeological evidence does not show a clear trial and error process. Instead, even the oldest wall sections exhibit extraordinary mastery, implying that the builders inherited a highly developed architectural tradition predating the fortress itself. The origin of this knowledge remains mysterious. Was it self-developed or influenced by unknown groups who once passed through the harsh desert region? The dry stone technique raises another question. How do these walls resist sand abrasion or gradual displacement? The Atacama Desert is one of the driest places on Earth, because yet strong winds are capable of eroding rock surfaces over decades. Even so, the walls of Pucara de Quito remain stable. Geologists believe the builders selected dense, durable stones that resist weathering, though exactly how they transported and sorted these stones remains unclear. Some theories suggest the stones were quarried directly on the slope, using gravity to move them downward before guiding and locking them into place. This method would have been extremely risky, requiring precise coordination, but it fits well with what is known about Atacameño society. The ingenuity of the walls becomes even clearer when seen in the context of the steep cliffs they occupy. Many fortified positions sit on inclines difficult to reach, yet the stonework there is highly stable. Some walls were reinforced by anchoring them to natural bedrock, forming a seamless bond between human construction and the mountain itself. The fortress becomes not merely a structure on rock, but a structure with the rock, an architectural philosophy showing adaptation rather than resistance to nature. Geotechnical analysis reveals that the arrangement of stones disperses load effects rather than concentrating stress in a single point. This demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of gravity and structural stability, on par with major ancient civilizations. The stone walls not only served as defenses, but also defined internal functional zones such as living areas, lookout points, storage spaces, and narrow passages designed to control movement during conflict. These internal partitions were built using the same dry stone method, simple, rugged, yet extremely durable. Their arrangement in tight spaces shows an advanced understanding of spatial optimization and safety. Some lower walls may have served ritual functions or supported perishable structures that no longer survive. Whatever their purpose, the consistency of stone-fitting techniques is undeniable. Encircling the fortress are long defensive walls that follow the mountain's natural contours. Their height varies depending on terrain irregularities. Remarkably, these walls run smoothly along slopes without abrupt breaks, proving that the builders surveyed the land with great precision. They did not merely stack stones, they aligned the entire architectural plan with natural wind patterns and the shape of the ridge, and this gave the fortress an unexpected harmony with nature, rare in ancient military architecture. The perfection of the dry stone method has sparked debates. Did the Atacameño people possess higher engineering capabilities than previously assumed? Did they use specialized tools, measurement systems, or stone selection techniques that modern researchers have yet to reconstruct? Some scholars argue that a non-written system of technical knowledge, rules, practices, and hands-on experience was transmitted across generations of builders. Coupled with the fortress' history of violent conflicts, particularly against Spanish forces in the 16th century, the durability of these walls becomes even more extraordinary. They survive not only time, but the assaults of human warfare. Thus, the dry stone walls of Pucará de Quito are more than a construction technique. They're a symbol of ancient knowledge, reflecting the precision and insight of a community thriving in one of the harshest environments on Earth. From stone selection, fitting methods, load optimization, and terrain integration to anticipating natural erosion, all these elements form a mystery not yet fully explained. Pucará de Quito Cliff Fortress is not merely a fortress. It is a testament to the capabilities of past civilizations, a chapter of stone architecture still unread in its entirety. Until its secrets are fully uncovered, these tightly fitted walls will continue standing silently in the desert, challenging modern assumptions about ancient engineering and craftsmanship. Do you think the dry stone construction technique of Pucará de Quito suggests that ancient builders possess knowledge far more advanced than we once believed? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Along the southeastern coast of India, where the Bay of Bengal crashes endlessly against ancient stone, lies one of the most intriguing archaeological mysteries in Asia, the Mahabalipuram sunken temples, often associated with the legendary 7 pagodas. Today, visitors see only the shore temple, a granite structure rising dramatically from the shoreline of Tamil Nadu. Yet historical records, local traditions, and modern underwater discoveries suggest that what stands today may be only a fragment of a much larger sacred complex that once stretched along the coast before much of it disappeared beneath the sea. For centuries, sailors travelling along the Coromandel coast reported seeing multiple temple towers rising near the shore, describing them as a line of magnificent pagodas visible from miles away. Meanwhile, European navigators in the 13th and 16th centuries even recorded these mysterious structures in their travel logs, referring to them collectively as the 7 pagodas, implying that 6 other monumental temples once stood beside the single surviving shrine. According to local legend, the gods themselves grew jealous of the city's beauty and sent a catastrophic flood that swallowed most of the temples, leaving only one visible above the waves. For generations, historians dismissed this tale as myth, until modern science began uncovering evidence suggesting the legend may contain more truth than anyone expected. The turning point came after the devastating Indian Ocean tsunami of 2004, when the sudden retreat of the sea briefly exposed structures that had been hidden underwater for centuries. A local resident and archaeologist reported seeing stone walls, carved blocks, and foundation-like formations emerging from the seabed just offshore. Subsequent surveys conducted by the Archaeological Survey of India (ASI) and the National Institute of Oceanography used sonar scanning and underwater exploration to identify a series of submerged structures extending several hundred meters along the coast. Among the discoveries were stone alignments, rectangular foundations, and large granite blocks weighing several tons, suggesting that an extensive architectural complex may once have existed along the shoreline. One submerged structure discovered approximately 500 to 700 meters offshore appears to resemble a large wall or platform more than 70 meters long, constructed from granite blocks arranged in linear patterns that do not resemble natural rock formations. These findings strengthen the possibility that Mahabalipuram may once have been part of a larger coastal city that was gradually swallowed by rising seas or catastrophic geological events. Yet the greatest mystery surrounding Mahabalipuram is not simply the possibility of lost temples beneath the ocean, but the astonishing engineering skill required to construct the monuments that still survive today. Particularly the mastery of granite stonework achieved more than 1,300 years ago during the Pallava dynasty. Granite is among the hardest natural stones used in ancient construction, ranking around 6 to 7 on the Mohs hardness scale, meaning it is significantly harder than limestone or sandstone used in many other ancient monuments. Cutting granite with precision is extremely difficult even with modern tools, yet the temples and sculptures of Mahabalipuram display extraordinary craftsmanship carved directly into massive granite outcrops. The Shore Temple, built around 700 to 728 CE during the reign of King Narasimhavarman II, is constructed almost entirely from large granite blocks, transported and assembled with remarkable accuracy. Unlike softer stone structures that could be shaped more easily, granite requires repeated hammering and chiseling using hardened metal tools, a process that would have demanded enormous time, labor, and technical knowledge. What was even more astonishing are the monolithic monuments scattered throughout Mahabalipuram, including the famous Pancharathas, a group of temples carved from single granite boulders, rather than assembled from separate stones. Each structure was sculpted downward from the top of a massive rock, transforming raw stone into complex temple architecture, complete with pillars, stairways, and intricate carvings. This type of monolithic architecture is extremely rare in the ancient world and requires a level of planning comparable to some of the most famous megalithic constructions on Earth. For comparison, the famous stone blocks of Machu Picchu in Peru, built by the Inca civilization around the 15th century, are often celebrated for their precision stonework and tight-fitting joints. Yet the granite carvings of Mahabalipuram predate Machu Picchu by nearly 800 years, demonstrating a similarly advanced understanding of stone shaping centuries earlier. Likewise, the enormous granite blocks used in the temples have been compared to the megalithic stones of Puma Punku in Bolivia, where individual stones weighing more than 100 tons were cut with remarkable accuracy. Although the stones at Mahabalipuram are generally smaller, many still weigh several tons and were transported across uneven coastal terrain before being assembled into temples that have endured more than a millennium of monsoon rains, storms, and saltwater erosion. Archaeological research suggests that the Pallava builders may have used a combination of iron chisels, hammerstones, wooden wedges, and controlled heating techniques to fracture and shape the granite. Some scholars propose that builders inserted wooden wedges into small cracks and then soaked them with water, causing the wood to expand and gradually split the rock along controlled lines. However, even with such techniques, achieving the level of detail seen in Mahabalipuram sculptures would have required extraordinary precision and patience. One of the most remarkable examples is the massive bas-relief known as Descent of the Ganges or Arjuna's Penance, a granite carving measuring roughly 27 meters long and 9 meters high, depicting hundreds of figures including gods, animals, and mythological beings. The relief is carved directly into a natural rock face and remains one of the largest open-air stone carvings in the world. Creating such a composition in granite would have required not only artistic mastery, but also precise engineering to prevent the rock from cracking or collapsing during the carving process. Despite centuries of research, archaeologists still debate how the ancient builders achieved such precision with the limited technology available during the 7th century. Unlike later stone-cutting techniques that relied on advanced metallurgy or mechanized tools, the craftsmen of Mahabalipuram worked with relatively simple iron implements. Yet the finished structures display clean edges, symmetrical pillars, and intricate decorative patterns that would challenge even modern stoneworkers using power tools. Some researchers believe the builders possess specialized knowledge of granite grain structure, allowing them to carve along natural fracture lines to shape the stone more efficiently. Others suggest that the construction process involved large teams of highly trained artisans working in coordinated stages over many decades. Historical inscriptions indicate that Mahabalipuram served as a major artistic and maritime center of the Pallava Empire, meaning the region likely hosted thousands of craftsmen, sculptors, and engineers dedicated to temple construction. Another unresolved mystery concerns how these massive granite blocks were transported to the shoreline in the first place. Unlike inland quarries, where stones could be dragged across flat ground, Mahabalipuram's coastal environment presents significant logistical challenges. Some archaeologists believe that builders use wooden sledges, rollers, and earthen ramps, similar to methods proposed for the construction of the Egyptian pyramids. However, no clear archaeological evidence of these transportation systems has yet been discovered in the region. The possibility that large portions of the ancient city now lie beneath the sea further complicates the investigation, as potential quarries, roads, or harbour facilities may be hidden underwater. Modern underwater archaeology continues to explore the submerged ruins offshore, searching for evidence that might confirm the existence of the legendary 7 pagodas. Sonar imaging has revealed additional stone formations that appear to follow geometric patterns inconsistent with natural geology, suggesting that more architectural remains may still lie buried beneath layers of sediment. If future excavations confirm that multiple temples once stood along this coastline, it would dramatically reshape our understanding of Mahabalipuram as not just a single temple site, but a vast ceremonial complex comparable to other ancient coastal cities such as Dwarka in India or Thonis Heracleion in Egypt, both of which were lost beneath the sea for centuries before being rediscovered by underwater archaeologists. Today, the surviving shore temple stands as a silent witness to an ancient civilization capable of remarkable engineering long before modern construction technology existed. Its granite towers have endured more than 1,300 years of ocean winds, salt, and storms, yet the structure remains largely intact, a testament to the skill of the builders who shaped the stone with extraordinary precision. Whether the underwater ruins nearby truly belong to the legendary 7 pagodas or to another lost coastal settlement remains an unresolved mystery. What is clear, however, is that the granite monuments of Mahabalipuram demonstrate a level of craftsmanship that still challenges modern understanding. Do you think the underwater ruins near Mahabalipuram are truly the remains of the legendary 7 pagodas? Or could they simply be natural rock formations that were misinterpreted? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Rising from the arid hills of southeastern Spain, the Fuente Alamo stands as one of the most intriguing and underappreciated archaeological sites of prehistoric Europe. Belonging to the enigmatic El Agar culture, which flourished between roughly 2200 and 1550 BCE, this settlement reveals a society that was far more complex, organized, and technologically advanced than once believed. At first glance, Fuente Alamo may appear to be just another ancient hillside ruin, but beneath its layered terraces and stone walls lies a narrative of innovation, hierarchy, and mystery that continues to challenge modern understanding. The settlement itself is ingeniously constructed along a steep slope, with houses arranged in terraced formations that seem almost engineered with modern precision. These structures were built using carefully fitted stones, forming durable walls that have endured for millennia without the use of mortar. The layout suggests not only a keen understanding of architecture and environmental adaptation, but also a centralized planning system, an early form of urban organization that hints at a structured and possibly hierarchical society. Narrow pathways and controlled access points further imply that the settlement was designed with both efficiency and defense in mind, reinforcing the idea that Fuente Alamo may have functioned as both a residential center and a strategic stronghold. Yet, one of the most striking aspects of life at Fuente Alamo lies not in its architecture but beneath it. The inhabitants practiced the unusual custom of burying their dead directly beneath the floors of their homes. These burials, often placed in ceramic jars or simple pits, were sometimes accompanied by grave goods such as weapons, ornaments, and tools. The variation in these offerings reveals a clear social stratification. Some individuals were interred with elaborate items, while others were buried with little to nothing. This stark contrast suggests the presence of a rigid class system, possibly governed by elites who controlled both resources and labor. It also raises profound questions about belief systems. Did the living see themselves as coexisting with their ancestors, or were these burials a symbolic claim over property and lineage? However, the most compelling and mysterious feature of Fuente Alamo, and indeed of the entire El Agar culture, is its unexpectedly advanced metallurgical technology. In an era when much of Europe was still transitioning from stone to metal, the inhabitants of this settlement demonstrated a remarkable mastery of bronze production that appears far ahead of its time. Archaeological evidence indicates that they were not merely using metal, but actively producing it with a level of consistency and sophistication that implies specialized knowledge and possibly even controlled production systems. Tools and weapons recovered from the site, such as daggers, halberds, and axes, exhibit uniform shapes and high-quality casting, suggesting that metallurgical processes were standardized rather than experimental. This level of consistency hints at the existence of skilled craftsmen or metallurgical specialists who understood not only how to smelt copper and alloy it with tin, but also how to refine and shape the resulting bronze with precision. The control of temperature, material ratios, and casting techniques required for such production would have demanded both experience and an empirical understanding of metallurgical principles, knowledge that is difficult to reconcile with the technological limitations traditionally associated with the Bronze Age. Even more intriguing is the question of resource acquisition. The production of bronze requires both copper and tin, yet tin deposits are relatively scarce and often located far from copper sources. This suggests that the people of Fuente Alamo were either part of a broader trade network or had developed logistical systems to obtain and transport these materials over considerable distances. If true, this would position the settlement not as an isolated community, but as a node within a larger economic and cultural network, one capable of sustaining specialized industries and long-distance exchange. Some researchers have proposed that this metallurgical sophistication may have been a key factor in the social hierarchy observed at the site. Control over metal production would have conferred significant power, allowing elites to monopolize weaponry, tools, and symbols of status. In this sense, metallurgy was not just a technological achievement, but a foundation for political and economic dominance. The presence of high-status burials containing finely crafted metal objects further supports this theory, suggesting that metal was both a practical resource and a marker of identity and authority. Yet, despite these advancements, the origins of this metallurgical knowledge remain deeply uncertain. Did the inhabitants of Fuente Alamo develop these techniques independently, through gradual experimentation and innovation? Or were they influenced by external cultures, perhaps through contact with more technologically advanced societies in the Eastern Mediterranean? The lack of clear transitional stages in the archaeological record makes it difficult to trace a linear progression, leading some to speculate that the knowledge may have appeared relatively suddenly, an anomaly that challenges conventional models of technological evolution. Equally puzzling is the eventual decline of the El Aga culture. Around 1550 BCE, settlements like Fuente Alamo were abruptly abandoned or transformed, and the sophisticated systems that had sustained them disappeared. There is no definitive evidence of widespread warfare, nor clear signs of catastrophic natural disasters. Some theories point to environmental stress, such as prolonged drought or soil depletion, which may have undermined agricultural productivity. Others suggest internal social tensions, perhaps exacerbated by rigid hierarchies and unequal resource distribution. It is also possible that disruptions in trade networks, particularly those supplying tin, could have crippled the metallurgical industry that formed the backbone of the society. Whatever the cause, the disappearance of Fuente Alamo and its culture remains one of the most compelling mysteries of prehistoric Europe. It represents not just the fall of a settlement, but the vanishing of a system that had achieved a remarkable balance of technological innovation, social organization, and environmental adaptation. Today, the ruins stand silent, their stones still aligned with the same precision as they were thousands of years ago, their secrets buried beneath layers of earth and time. In the end, Fuente Alamo forces us to reconsider what we think we know about the Bronze Age. It challenges the notion of linear progress and reminds us that advanced knowledge and complex societies can emerge and disappear far from the centers of history we typically recognize. Most of all, it leaves us with a haunting question. How could a civilization capable of such metallurgical mastery, architectural ingenuity, and social organization simply fade into obscurity, leaving behind only fragments of its once extraordinary existence? What do you think truly caused the civilization at Fuente Alamo to mysteriously disappear like that? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Rising from the small Mediterranean island of Malta, the megalithic temples of Tarxian remain one of the most astonishing prehistoric engineering achievements ever discovered. Located near modern-day Valletta, the complex was first uncovered in the year 1914, when local farmers accidentally exposed massive stone blocks while ploughing their fields. Archaeological excavations soon followed under the direction of Maltese archaeologist Themistocles Zammit, revealing an elaborate ceremonial site constructed between roughly 3,600 and 2,500 BCE. This means the Tarxian complex is older than the Great Pyramid of Giza by nearly 1,000 years, placing it among the earliest monumental stone structures on Earth. The temples belong to a unique tradition of megalithic architecture found across Malta, including sites such as Hagar Kim and Najdra. Yet Tarxian stands out for its extraordinary complexity, rich decoration, and above all the perplexing engineering required to move and position enormous limestone blocks long before the invention of metal tools or wheeled transport. At the heart of the mystery lies a simple but staggering question. How were the enormous stones of Tarxian moved into place? Many of the megaliths used in the temples weigh between 10 and 20 tons, with some reaching heights of more than 3 meters. These blocks form curved walls, massive doorways, and intricate internal chambers arranged in a clover-shaped architectural layout typical of Maltese prehistoric temples. Moving stones of this size would be challenging even with modern equipment, yet the builders of Tarxian achieved it more than 5,000 years ago with technologies that appear, at least on the surface, extremely limited. Archaeologists have found no evidence that the people of prehistoric Malta possessed iron tools, large draft animals, or even the wheel at the time the temples were constructed. In fact, the wheel did not appear in Europe until roughly 2,000 years later. This technological gap has led researchers to investigate alternative explanations for how such massive stones could have been transported across the landscape. One of the most intriguing clues emerged during excavations when archaeologists discovered spherical limestone balls scattered near the temple complex. These objects, often about 10 to 15 centimeters in diameter, resemble primitive ball bearings. Some researchers believe that the builders of the Tarxian temples may have placed these stone spheres beneath heavy slabs to create a rolling platform, allowing large blocks to move more easily across prepared tracks. Experiments conducted by modern engineers have shown that similar systems can indeed reduce friction dramatically, making it possible for a relatively small group of people to move multi-ton stones. However, the exact method remains uncertain. While the spheres suggest a form of prehistoric engineering ingenuity, archaeologists have not yet found definitive evidence proving precisely how the system was organized, or whether it could reliably handle the largest stones in the complex. Furthermore, Malta's terrain raises additional questions. The island lacks extensive forests, meaning that the builders had limited access to large quantities of timber that might have been used for sledges, rollers, or scaffolding. This scarcity makes the logistics of transporting multi-ton stones across even short distances even more puzzling. Comparisons with other ancient megalithic sites highlight just how remarkable Tarxian's construction truly is. At Stonehenge, for example, some stones weighing around 25 tons were transported from quarries hundreds of kilometers away, likely using sledges and wooden rollers. Yet Stonehenge was built more than 1,000 years after Tarxian and in a region rich in timber resources. Similarly, the Great Pyramid of Giza involved the movement of limestone blocks weighing several tons each, but Egyptian builders had access to copper tools, or organized labor forces numbering in the thousands and sophisticated ramp systems. In contrast, the prehistoric society that constructed Tarxian appears to have been relatively small and technologically simple. Malta itself was never a vast civilization with massive populations. Estimates suggest that the entire island may have supported only a few thousand inhabitants during the temple building period. This raises another profound mystery. How could such a small community mobilize the labor and technical knowledge required to construct such monumental architecture? Archaeological investigations throughout the 20th century have revealed that Tarxian actually consists of 4 interconnected temples, each constructed during different phases over several centuries. Excavations carried out in the 1920s and later decades uncovered elaborate stone altars, carved reliefs, and fragments of colossal statues. Among the most famous discoveries is the lower half of a gigantic limestone statue believed to represent a fertility goddess, once standing more than 2.5 meters tall. The statue's finely carved drapery and smooth surfaces demonstrate a level of craftsmanship that seems surprisingly advanced for a Neolithic culture using stone tools. Yet the artistry of Tarxian extends far beyond sculpture. Many of the temple walls are decorated with intricate spiral carvings, among the most sophisticated prehistoric stone engravings ever discovered in Europe. These spirals are deeply incised into limestone slabs, arranged in repeating patterns that suggest careful planning and artistic tradition. Equally impressive is the architectural precision of the complex. The temples are arranged along a central axis and organized into symmetrical chambers connected by narrow passageways. Massive upright stones form doorways leading into apsidal rooms where ritual altars once stood. Some of these stones were shaped with surprising accuracy, creating smooth surfaces and carefully aligned edges. Archaeologists have noted that many of the blocks appear to have been carefully dressed and fitted together, suggesting an advanced understanding of stoneworking techniques. Even today, the walls maintain their structural integrity despite thousands of years of weathering. This durability indicates that the builders understood how to select suitable limestone and how to distribute weight effectively within the structure. Evidence discovered during excavations also suggests that Tarxin served as an important ritual and ceremonial center. Animal bones found near altars indicate that sacrifices were performed within the temples, possibly as part of fertility or seasonal ceremonies. Some archaeologists have proposed that the complex functioned as a sacred space where communities gathered for religious events, reinforcing social cohesion in prehistoric Maltese society. However, the exact belief system of the temple builders remains unknown, as they left behind no written records. Without texts or inscriptions, researchers must rely entirely on physical evidence to reconstruct the meaning of the site. Despite more than a century of research, the greatest enigma of Tarxin continues to revolve around its engineering. The transportation and placement of enormous stones remain only partially understood, and every new excavation seems to raise further questions. In recent years, advanced technologies such as laser scanning and three-dimensional modeling have allowed archaeologists to study the temples with unprecedented precision. These studies reveal subtle construction patterns and possible quarry sources for some of the stones, but they still do not fully explain how the builders managed the logistics of moving such massive blocks. What Tarxian ultimately demonstrates is that prehistoric societies may have possessed far more sophisticated engineering knowledge than we once believed. How do you think the builders of the Tarxian temples managed to move stone blocks weighing dozens of tons more than 5,000 years ago? Share your thoughts or theories in the comments below. The Rosetta Stone is often described as the key that unlocked the lost language of ancient Egypt. Yet beyond its famous role in deciphering hieroglyphs, the stone itself remains one of the most intriguing technological artifacts from the ancient world. Discovered in 1799 by the French officer Pierre-François Bouchard near the Egyptian town of Rosetta during the military expedition of Napoleon Bonaparte, the dark slab of granodiorite dates back to 196 BCE, during the reign of Ptolemy V. At first glance, it appears to be a relatively simple decree carved into stone, but closer inspection reveals something far more remarkable, an artifact that demonstrates an extraordinary level of linguistic organization, material engineering, and stone carving precision that still fascinates archaeologists today. The Rosetta Stone stands roughly 1 meter tall and weighs more than 700 kilograms. Its surface contains a decree issued by priests in honor of the young pharaoh Ptolemy V. What makes the inscription historically invaluable is that the same message appears in 3 different writing systems: Classical Greek, Demotic Egyptian, and the sacred hieroglyphic script used in temples and royal monuments. This triple text structure ultimately allowed the French scholar Jean-François Champollion to decipher Egyptian hieroglyphs in 1822, ending more than 15 centuries of linguistic mystery. However, while historians often focus on the linguistic breakthrough, the technical execution of the stone itself raises a different set of questions, especially regarding the astonishing precision of its engraving. The Rosetta Stone is carved from granodiorite, a dense igneous rock closely related to granite. On the Mohs hardness scale, this material ranks around 6 to 7, making it significantly harder than many types of limestone used in Egyptian monuments. Engraving detailed characters into such stone requires tools capable of repeatedly striking the surface without shattering either the tool or the stone. Yet the characters on the Rosetta Stone remain remarkably crisp. Even after more than 2,000 years, many of the grooves remain sharp enough to cast visible shadows under angled light. When researchers from the British Museum conducted microscopic surface studies in the late 20th century, they observed that the depth of many carved strokes varies by less than a millimeter. This level of uniformity suggests that the engravers worked with carefully controlled tools and a consistent carving method. To appreciate how unusual this precision is, it is useful to compare the Rosetta Stone with other inscriptions from the ancient Mediterranean world. Many Roman stone inscriptions, for example, display slight irregularities in line spacing and carving depth, especially when long texts were produced by multiple artisans. Even monumental inscriptions on marble structures, such as those found in the Roman Forum, often show subtle variations in letter proportions. By contrast, the Greek text on the Rosetta Stone appears strikingly consistent in height, alignment, and spacing. The Demotic script above it, though more fluid in style, maintains a steady baseline across hundreds of characters. And the hieroglyphic section at the top, although partially broken today, demonstrates carefully balanced symbol placement that suggests deliberate planning before any carving began. Archaeologists believe the engraving process likely began with extensive surface preparation. Before the first character was cut, the stone had to be ground into a relatively flat plane. Evidence of fine abrasion marks indicates that the artisans probably used sand or powdered quartz as an abrasive, rubbing the surface repeatedly until it became smooth enough for inscription. Only after this stage would scribes mark guidelines for the text layout. These guidelines, now barely visible, ensured that each line would remain straight and evenly spaced across the stone. Without such preparation, carving hundreds of characters onto hard stone would almost inevitably lead to drifting lines or distorted spacing. Another remarkable aspect of the Rosetta Stone is the density of information carved into its surface. The surviving inscription contains hundreds of lines of text, totaling thousands of characters across the 3 scripts. Despite this complexity, the layout remains carefully balanced. The Greek section alone contains more than 50 lines, each carved with consistent letter proportions. Modern digital measurements conducted by epigraphers show that many letters differ in height by less than 2 millimeters across the entire inscription. Such uniformity implies either a single master engraver or a highly disciplined workshop where multiple artisans followed strict guidelines. The technological question becomes even more intriguing when we consider the tools available in Ptolemaic Egypt. Bronze chisels were common during earlier periods, but bronze alone struggles to cut granodiorite effectively without frequent sharpening. Some researchers therefore suggest that the artisans may have used hardened iron tools, which were becoming increasingly common during the late 1st millennium BCE. Others argue that repeated hammering with small pointed chisels, combined with abrasive sand, could gradually carve even very hard stone. Yet no surviving workshop manuals or detailed records describe the exact techniques used by Egyptian stone engravers of this era. As a result, the full manufacturing process behind the Rosetta Stone remains partly speculative. Excavations and studies conducted during the 19th and 20th centuries further deepen the mystery. Scholars examining the inscription notice subtle variations between the 3 scripts. The Greek text appears slightly deeper and more angular, suggesting that it may have been carved first or by a different artisan. The Demotic script shows smoother curves, while the hieroglyphic section displays more pictorial symbols that required careful shaping. This raises the possibility that specialized craftsmen were assigned to each script each trained in a particular writing tradition. If true, the Rosetta Stone would represent a collaborative project between multiple linguistic experts and stone carvers working under royal authority. The precision of the engraving also reveals something about the administrative sophistication of Ptolemaic Egypt. Producing a trilingual decree required coordination between scribes fluent in different languages. The Greek version served the ruling Macedonian elite. The Demotic script addressed the everyday Egyptian bureaucracy, and the hieroglyphic version carried sacred authority within temples. Translating the same message across these linguistic systems without major inconsistencies required careful editorial oversight. The fact that the stone's inscriptions remain largely coherent across all three scripts suggests the existence of an organized scholarly tradition capable of managing complex textual production. Over the centuries, the Rosetta Stone has suffered damage, including the loss of its upper section where additional hieroglyphs once appeared. Yet the surviving inscription still reveals the extraordinary skill of its creators. Even today, modern stonemasons admit that carving thousands of precise characters into such hard granodiorite while keeping perfect alignment would be extremely difficult, even with steel tools. More than 2,000 years ago, ancient artisans achieved this remarkable precision using techniques that historians still do not fully understand. Because of this, the Rosetta Stone is not only a key to decoding ancient Egyptian writing, but also a powerful reminder of the advanced craftsmanship of the ancient world. The methods, tools, and organization behind its creation remain questions that continue to intrigue researchers today. In your opinion, how were ancient Egyptian craftsmen able to carve thousands of precise characters into such hard granodiorite more than 2,000 years ago? What kind of technology might they have used? Share your thoughts in the comments below.